Hello, welcome to the Mirror Point where reality is checking itself, folks. Today's conversation, man, is one I've really been looking forward to. I'm joined by Alex from Freebird Media. He'll be talking to me and Sophia today, and we're diving straight into the deep end, not just politics, not just culture, but the metaphysical assumptions behind it all. We're going to be talking about a lot of things that I think you guys will find very interesting, because here's the real question. Are our political divisions downstream from something even deeper? So we're going to explore idealism versus physicalism, which are like two radically different ways of understanding reality. Is consciousness fundamental, or is it just a byproduct of matter? And how might that foundational belief shape the way we think about identity, power, morality, meaning, things like that? And so from there, we're going to move right into, identity politics, the culture wars, the growing sense of fragmentation in America, across the world. What's actually causing the division? That's what we want to figure out. Is it just economics? Is it just the media? Is it just the tribal psychology? Or are we witnessing a deeper crisis of metaphysics, a collapse of shared meaning, you might say? And most importantly, could a coherent political and metaphysical philosophy possibly serve as a stabilizing force? Could the right framework, like one that properly understands consciousness, responsibility, and human nature, act as a positive guide forward? So this won't really be a surface level discussion. We're going to connect worldview to culture, philosophy to politics, and metaphysics to everyday life, right? So buckle up. It's going to be very thoughtful, challenging, and hopefully very clarifying for you guys. And after we do the discussion, I'm going to open the stage up. So if you have any sort of questions, anything you want to add, contribute to the conversation, you're more than welcome to join the conversation, man. And I look really forward to that. So let's get this thing going. Sophia and Alex, nice to see you guys. How's it going, man?
Good, thanks. Glad to be here. Really appreciate the invitation.
Hell yeah, I've been looking forward to it. I stumbled across, some of your content. It was in my live feed, and I was like, oh, somebody's talking about idealism in politics. And I checked it out, and I was like, oh man, I've got to get in touch with this guy and see if we can have some kind of conversation on it. So welcome to have you here. You're glad to be here. How you doing, Sophia? Uh-oh, you are muted, girl.
Oh, my bad. Doing okay.
Cool, man. So how's the weather where are you at actually, Alex? So you're on the East Coast, right?
Well, I'm in Toronto, downtown Toronto, and we just got the biggest snowstorm in recorded history for the city. So we had like 40 centimeters last week. So it's been a really cold week, absolutely buried under several feet of snow. And then today, I think we're around 0. So that's actually a warm day for us at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn. And it's like 70 degrees over here right now. What about
Same
you, Sophia?
here.
Same there. Yeah, we're down in the south. Yeah.
Sorry, what state are you in?
I'm in Florida, and Sophia's
I'm
in
in
Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Right on.
Yeah, man. So it's like mild weather, early spring for us. In fact, for us in Florida, it's been a pretty mild winter for the most part. Maybe a few cold days here and there, but it's been pretty warm. Yeah. So I can't complain. I'm not really big on the cold weather. I lived in Germany and the East Coast here in America, and I've never been a fan of that cold damn weather, man. I don't know how you guys do it.
Yeah, it gets even worse. But man, the summers are not like, the weather is becoming more extreme because the summers here also get super hot, like up to 40. So like really hot July and really cold February. We get both extremes here.
Ooh, I bet. Now, Sophia, she lived in Germany. She was born and raised there. So she
Oh wow.
likes all that cold weather, man. She loves that
Yeah,
cold weather.
the cold don't really phase me, but now that I'm getting older, it does like make my joints hurt a little bit, just like an old lady.
Mhm.
So I can't take the cold like I used to, but I damn sure don't like the heat. The heat is even worse.
Yeah, yeah, I bet it gets pretty damn hot down there in both of those states.
Oh
Hell
yeah.
yeah. So what we do, just to let you know, here on the Mirror Point, we talk about philosophy of mind and things of that nature. I sort of identify as an idealist. So I look at consciousness as fundamental, and Sophia the same way. Sophia has her own model of idealism called the LFM model, and it's
Lord.
kind of similar. She can describe it for you, I'm sure, at some point. But what is I know you do a lot of philosophy just based on your channel and everything. How do you approach the philosophy of mind and idealism yourself?
I would say that as a technical little caveat, I would say that I'm a very agnostic person. But I'm, but I would also then just be fair to say I'm an idealist because pretty much I do believe that that's the real model that we should be working with. So I'd say like a kind of an analytical idealist, similar to Bernardo Kastrup, maybe. Little few points I disagree with him on, but I'm open to being proven wrong on anything, and I think. Robert Anton Wilson's probably my biggest influence intellectually, and he had this saying like, "Only the madman is absolutely sure." And I think that's something to keep in mind. But I definitely then would say like, if we're going to look at models and what I think is most likely probable, I would definitely say I'm like an idealist. So I would say like, I think consciousness is some sort of fundamental aspect of the universe. Maybe there are others, but I don't think like time and space. I suspect just exist within consciousness. So I think that consciousness is not an epiphenomenal byproduct of computation. So I don't think that LLMs or AI will ever be conscious. Maybe conceptually in the future, a different concept of AI could be, but nothing that I'm currently aware of that I think is even moving in the direction of consciousness. So I treat it as fundamental. And I'm not a solipsist, so I do think that like there are other consciousnesses and that we're sharing some sort of reality. So in a sense, we could perceive it almost like a shared dream, but it's that, there's still obviously objective things all around us that in our day-to-day life, like these are real, the physical stuff is real, but ultimately the important point to keep in mind is that like the mind, the subjective experience and the mind are upstream of the material world and not downstream. So that's kind of where I'm coming
Right.
from.
Right. And Sophia, she has a specific view on that. How would you describe LFM compared to what he said there?
Well, it's very similar. I guess I just have a little extra little spin on that. I definitely see consciousness as primordial, but I think that, I mean, I don't deny the physicality at all. I don't think it's a dream. I think it's that consciousness can only present as what it already is within itself. So consciousness must have the potential for physicality already within itself. So in other words, the physical reality is just an expression of consciousness, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't see how that's not actually any different than what I'm saying. I just use the word dream as a metaphor, like a loose metaphor, but
Right.
essentially same idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And, for me, I was always trying to figure out, like, it's just recently that I really wrapped my head totally around what Sophia's model was actually saying. Because I also look at like panpsychism, which seem to be a little similar to that in a way, but I've realized it's not really, because panpsychism says that both, like it treats consciousness kind of like as a fundamental substance and matter as a fundamental substance. But what
Right.
Sophia is saying is that no, matter is derivative of consciousness. So it's kind of the same thing that we're saying, you know, it's just a real expression, you might say.
Sure.
And
I'm much more in the camp, like in Sophie's camp, like matter is derivative of mind, not equally fundamental. So
yeah,
if we get into quantum physics, for example, obviously there's no agreement on what it's saying. There's just these interpretations. But in my view, it's kind of straightforward, like the double slit experiment and the observer effect. It's showing you that the physical stuff, it doesn't really exist other than a probability field until it's like interacting with a conscious mind. So like I don't think it's equally fundamental. I think consciousness is like primary, I guess.
Right.
yeah, that makes sense to me too. And like, I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Hoffman,
Sure. Yes.
and he talks about a lot of the fundamental ideas of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which would say that matter really just sort of becomes unmeasurable at what, like 10 to the minus 33 or 35 centimeters for Planck time and Planck
Yeah.
scales, right? And so it can't be fundamental because whatever it is we're calling matter ceases to be that thing at that level.
Yeah.
So the only thing at that point is some sort of mathematical description. And you know, and I guess that sort of, I had me and Sophia both, we sort of debated with these folks that were what they call mathematical realists or physicalists, and they say no, reality is that what you're talking about. When you say that it becomes the description at that level, the reason why is because that's all there is mathematical structure. So they were trying to make the argument that actually math is more real than your experience, which really
Yeah.
confuses me because I'm like, so you're saying that somewhere within the equations is all my experiences of life, stuff like this. Like, yeah, it's even more real than all that. And I'm like,
Yeah. I'm not
but
in
I
that camp.
always see math as a description. It's something
Yeah.
we created. It's like,
Definitely. It's
I
a
don't,
language basically between different. Like I like Donald Hoffman. I agree with. I think that conscious realism, as he calls it, is just a euphemism for idealism. And so I do think that there are different. You're conscious, I'm conscious, and we're interacting. And mathematics is like a language that keeps the reality that we're sharing coherent between us. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ork-OR theory, which Stuart
yeah,
Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose. So Roger Penrose, I was watching a debate with him, and he's a mathematician. He believes that mathematics like exist independent of the human mind. They're just we don't invent math; we discover like what math is. I'm really agnostic on that subject. Like I think it's possible, but it's also possible that we're creating math with our own human mind as we go along, and it happens to help us unmap like sort of this. And again, another metaphor, but like the simulated reality that we're in, if you want to look at it that way, like we're I think we're active participants in it. It's not like so mathematics being like the fundamental reality. I don't, or even numbers or anything like that. I don't personally think so. I think that comes out of consciousness again.
yeah.
I agree.
I just can't understand. I mean, I'm not opposed to any idea, but until you give me a reason or some kind of connector, I couldn't genuinely say I agree. Like, you know, so when people talk like that, oh, math is the reality, that your experience is on top of the math. We're still left with the hard problem of consciousness because
Sure.
how
Yeah.
does an equation lead to an experience, something like an experience?
Yeah.
And they
Qualia,
never tell
right?
you that part.
Exactly. Like the qualia, the subjective states that we experience, the color red or the feeling of anger. Like, and what are they? What in a more precise way? What are they saying that math is the color red or math is the experience of anger? I'm not sure how they exactly correlate them, but to bring it all back to a more important issue, like ultimately why I think idealism is so important to talk about is that it does have room for free will and therefore a form of morality, because the physicalists and the materialists, I don't think they're like, if they were right by their own philosophy, there is no such thing as like morality or free will or anything like that, which then is, that obviously has huge political implications on everything and how we should be living our lives, etc. So at least from an idealist perspective, we still have room on the table for, you know, free will, and the human experience is such that I don't know how you would really live without believing that you have some degree of free will.
Right, right. Like I'm more of a compatibilist on that. So I kind of feel like there's a degree of freedom.
Right.
There has to be, otherwise it doesn't make sense to really say anything or do anything. So even if you might say, well, it's just a useful fiction, okay, fine. Then it's a useful fiction. It's useful, so it's real enough. Then you've just defined reality as something very useful. What do you think, Sophia? Do you believe in morality and free will and stuff like that? I know we've talked about that before.
I just think that free will is limited, but we do have a certain level of free will. We're able to make choices, and I guess we can align ourselves with the nature of reality, and we obviously don't know for certain what that is exactly, but I guess we can do the best that we can do.
Yeah. We used to have a co-host, Objective Ethics, and he does a lot of debates about objective morality. And you know, he's kind of moved on, does his own channel, but he really argues a lot for objective morality. And one of the things he runs into a lot, and we've talked about this, and I think I was on his show last week or so, and we were discussing live, and we were talking about some of the problems because he can't seem to get like a logical syllogism to really argue logically for objective morality, but he does appeal to most of your academics, like most of academia when it comes to philosophy of mind, at least according to like your field papers and things like that, will tell you that most atheist philosophers believe in objective morality. Now, it might not be grounded in God, but it's grounded in nature. This could be something like just the grounding of consciousness, for example, that even if you're not an idealist, even if you're a physicalist and you don't reject consciousness, you can ground morality in consciousness, because consciousness is still the seat of things like ethics, morality, anything that you talk about like that. How would you argue for objective? I guess you're as an idealist, so how would you specifically argue for objective morality in that case?
This is the way I view it. There's some nuance here, so it's taken me a moment just to elaborate on this. And it's again, I'm an idealist, and this is going to bring up a very fundamentally important related question, which is mind at large meta-conscious of us or not? And so this is the thing. I think that most, like, I'm an atheist in the traditional sense that I don't believe in the Abrahamic God of, like, you know, Christianity or that kind of thing, like a man on a cloud. Just in that sense, I'm much more an atheist, and I like naturalism. So like how systems, physical or otherwise, would naturally evolve inside of an idealist paradigm. But also, I think that most like materialist atheists are actually incoherent, and that as much as I like, you know, humanism, for example, though they're confusing subjective preferences with objective facts. At least a nihilist is coherent intellectually when they just say there's only subjective preferences. Like, I know I have friends who are nihilists, and they don't condone, like, you know, abusing children, for example, but they just say it's my preference that people don't do that. They don't actually think there's an objective wrong or right about it. The way that I view it as an idealist is that I have in my theory, and this is different than like a scientist. I'm not trying to argue this based on like it's my personal suspicion, is that mind at large, as Aldous Huxley called it, or Bernardo Castrop. I actually think that mind at large, that we are fragments of is metaconscious of us. So in that sense, like I would perceive it, the larger consciousness, as God, but that word is loaded and it throws a lot of people off. So my sense of morality comes down to like, we're experiencing dualism right now. I'm not you and you're not me, and we're separate consciousnesses. But I do think that we are probably animated by the same larger consciousness. So if I harm you or if I don't harm you, that's in a two steps removed. Like I'm harming myself because I'm harming that thing that we both are a part of. So my morality comes down to like, how does our behavior and our ethics affect the larger mind? So like, I think it's immoral to, abuse children or something, because ultimately that's a piece of ourselves. And so when it comes down to judgment, I don't think that the larger mind or conscience, if it's meta conscious, I don't think it has like a human ego, but if it has, because my logic on this is, if we are smaller conscious units and we have free will, then the bigger one probably has free will as well. And it seems odd in the hierarchy to say that I would have meta consciousness, but the consciousness above me doesn't. Like, it seems like it would flip. So probably there's some subjective judging going on the part, God. I think that God probably just observes what's happening through its own / our free will, and is like, I like this one. This one is, a loving being, and it makes the system better. This one over here, that's, this abusing everyone, this isn't really making this thing better. So when it dies, I don't need to reuse it. And the other one's like, I suspect that for some of us, some kind of aspect of us probably, goes on past material death. I don't think our egoic mind necessarily continues. Whereas other conscious agents, as Donald Hoffman would call them, probably like, they're like an experiment. They didn't amount to much, and then there's no need for them to exist anymore.
Yeah. So Joel brought up go ahead, Sophia. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I pretty much agree. I think that consciousness is something that it wants continuity. It wants to continue, and so when we make choices, I think the best way to do that is to determine or try to predict the outcome. And if the outcome is destructive and interrupts continuity, is that how you say it? Then we tend to not make that choice, except for the people that do. And I think it has to do with their level of awareness or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's another important concept, the level of awareness. That's also very relevant. Because we also know, like, for example, I did a review of this book on my channel, The Righteous Mind. A lot of human behavior is instinctual, right? And I don't think that we're all operating at the same level of consciousness either. For some people, we're more meta-conscious and self-aware of our awareness than other people who are kind of running on autopilot. So that's another reason why morality is not completely objective to me, because it depends on what level of awareness you have. I mean, I'm aware of more nuance and complicated things than somebody who's less intelligent. So for them, it's more black and white. For me, there's more, it's harder in some ways to make decisions, because for me, like, I can recognize my instinctual thoughts and then decide if I want to act that way just because it's an impulse, that's an instinct, or not. Whereas other people, they're just basically led around all day by their instincts. So like, when you bring up like pardon me, sorry?
Oh, I was saying, yeah, impulsivity and lack of self-control.
Yeah. So like, the level of consciousness is not equal among all of us as conscious agents. And so that, the larger system is probably looking at us from, and perceiving like how we act based on our level of awareness.
And Joel asked a question. He says, we're a part of the same, quote unquote, can be just as much used as an excuse to act immorally than as a basis to act morally. How would you respond to that statement?
Yeah, I'm not sure what he actually means by that. Like, I'm not sure what his logic is there. Like, my logic is that if we're all one subjective thing, I wouldn't want it to feel pain, because it's an extension of myself. I'm not sure how I'm not sure what logic he's using there to say, like, well, I can use this as an excuse to harm people. I just don't know what his thought process is there. I don't know what he means.
Yeah, like, maybe, yeah, some people could say, well, Hitler and the Nazis thought they were acting for the betterment of humanity by getting rid of the Jewish people or something like that, right? And so in their morality, they could appeal to, we're a part of the same as that. But I mean, that kind of opens up, well, when is it ever really to roast people in ovens as a good thing, whether you agree with them
Well, I mean,
or
when it
not?
comes to consciousness, I kind of share Carl Jung's view there. Like, I don't see consciousness as something that's perfect. It's evolving, it's learning, and I'm pretty sure that consciousness has a shadow side and is not at all times aware of everything yet. Once we're going through stages as we evolve, and like we just said, there are levels of consciousness, and so I don't think that we can look at consciousness as this sky daddy that's perfect. And if he's so perfect, why is he creating evil? Well, it's because of unconsciousness. And until the conscious is made conscious, you're going to repeat mistakes and things that we perceive as evil. So that's how I would look at that.
One thing to keep in mind, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Levin.
Yeah,
But he's like
sure.
he's a biologist, and
Platonic
you can
forms.
kind of, you can sort of look at bodies or structures like a collection of cells as sort of a microcosm of the universe itself. Like we're talking about the greater mind versus the fractaling. And you could even look at examples within biological systems as sort of mimicking that same sort of manifestation. And so what you may notice when you do that is that all of these little cells that comprise, like, say, a human body or a cat body or something like that, will be acting in accord with its own goals, its own sort of intelligence to get to a particular problem solving thing, right? Which may be totally disassociated from, say, our minds right now. Our goal is to talk about these topics on this channel right now. We're having this conversation, and that's what our minds are focused on. Meanwhile, we've got billions of trillions of little cells and bacterias and things like that, all doing its own thing to sort of accomplish that higher goal, right? So it's sort of like a top down, bottom up sort of interaction at play. And maybe reality is in that same way. So maybe consciousness overall may have a totally disassociated goal than what we may be aware of. Maybe it's just beyond our comprehension. What do you think?
Oh, I got three things I want to say, like based on what you guys just said. So I'll try to be concise about this. Backing up for a moment to like Nazi Germany, for example, and Hitler. I think that I could make a very objective case from like Hitler's been well studied. I think that he had a personality disorder and that he was a malignant narcissist, which is a type of mental condition that results from his upbringing combined with other factors. So I don't think that he was meta-conscious at all, and neither do I think that most Nazis. I think his following and his base, they were all running on like instinct mode, like a lower animal than someone who's actually meta-conscious. So I think that meta consciousness is probably like the highest on that, like in terms of evolution as like a graph, like the most evolved people are those of us with meta consciousness. So I think it's sort of up to us, those like philosophers and scientists and thinkers who are meta conscious, to try to package this as a coherent ideology for people, because like when people are running on autopilot, when they're asleep, as Gurdjieff said, like they're on autopilot mode, and some malignant narcissist leader comes along and rounds them all up. They're capable of horrible atrocities, right? So I think that evolution is forced. We're not in a separate world anymore. The world is a round, interconnected ball. What we need, and human beings have evolved to be religious or teleologically driven. So what we need is a more coherent philosophy that isn't nihilistic, that isn't materialistic, or that isn't an Abrahamic religion that's based in hard like philosophy, like idealism, which posits that we basically, for lack of a better, more precise term, have like a soul or subjectivity, and Hitler is a product of his environment as well, right? And I would argue that Europe at the time that he was growing up was just toxic to begin with, the whole nation state concept and empire and all that stuff. So what we need to do is just prevent these type of narcissistic animals from getting in power in the first place. Like, I don't see how idealism actually justifies like anything that the Nazis did or any of that, and just the opposite. I think that empathy goes hand in hand with being meta-conscious. I'm not sure personally how you could be very meta-conscious and not be empathetic. So that's just a comment on historical things like that. Forgive me, I forget, you asked me another question I was going to respond to. I can't remember.
Oh yeah, Michael Evans, the collective intelligence of cells, and
right. That also is a very intriguing conversation, because like there's maybe an atom has a free will between state A and state B, or individual cells seem to have a type of mind, like they make decisions and they do odd things. They don't seem just completely reactionary. But that begs the question, like, at what kind of like, how lucid is that mind, right? And I think there's hierarchies of consciousness, like I don't think an individual cell, or if my liver is conscious, like Michael Levin talks about, I don't think it's as egoic of a mind as I have.
Right.
So
me too.
At our level of the mind that we have, I think we have some responsibility to use it to try to or maybe we're endowed with it to begin with as part of the evolutionary process to help the whole species kind of like move along with us. Evolution hasn't stopped. We're still subject to it. And the Hitler example is a perfect example. Is if we don't become more meta-conscious, look what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, and there is a trajectory, the moral progress. You can see that. Go ahead, Sophia.
I agree. I just wanted to push back a little bit on how you said that earlier, because that could come off like, oh yeah, it's just God's will, and it has a greater purpose, and that's why bad things happen. And I don't think of it like that. I think of it as, it's parts of consciousness that consciousness has not brought, made conscious to itself yet, right? And so there are going to be parts of consciousness that we see or experience as bad. And like he said, it's our responsibility to try to, I don't want to sound like some guru, but awaken people, help people become more conscious, because it takes accountability. That's all there's to it. You have to want to progress. You have to want to do better. And you can't do that if you're, not conscious enough, if you're running around like a philosophical zombie. So I agree. Those of us who are more meta-conscious, it is our job to try to do that. You know what I'm saying? And that's not in a narcissistic way or saying that, oh yeah, I'm so much more better than you or whatever, because there's a difference between people who do that because they want to feel special and whatever. And then there are those of us who really have a lot of empathy, and we're deeply affected by the things that we see happening, I would say, in a way that some people just aren't. And that's just how I naturally am. I try not to care sometimes because it's overwhelming, but I can't help it. And so that's my motivation for wanting to talk about these things, because I think at the end of the day, we have to realize we're all in this together. We're non-duality is even practically more unifying. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. And I didn't mean to imply anything was like necessarily like God's will, but I just think novel situations come up naturally. So yeah. This is a speculation I have about reality, and it's just a speculation. I'm not elevating this to like a dogmatic belief or anything. But if there is this one consciousness that we all are individualized pieces of, or like a larger mind, and we could conceive of that as a sense and as God, perhaps the monad, the one thing that is just wants, perhaps it's doing this because it wants to generate dualism so it can experience things with it. Like, if you are everything, you can't have a surprise because you know everything, right? So maybe this is sort of an evolutionary process to evolve itself into into multiple pieces where you, along with free will, you have like higher quality. Like I would want to be in a dream or a world with other conscious people so that we can have like shared experiences, but I don't want to be in a world with like narcissists and evil. So it might be that like this is just a refining process, and so like based on free will, when I like those of us who are more evolved, like when we die, we might wake up in another simulated reality with other people who are also of that quality. And like hell, rather than being a Christian concept, is possibly just another type of simulation where people have ended up based on their free will with other like-minded people. So like, and there's this idea of refining individual consciousnesses over time as a part of like naturalistic evolution within the mind of God is something that I think about often as a possibility.
Yeah, I can understand that a lot, because I've had a lot of discussions with folks about non-dualism versus dualism. And one of the things that I already realize is that all meaning, like you could just say even meaning of words are only come into play when, as opposed to their opposite. You know, like you define a word because of the opposite. You know, you have to have something that it's not in order to find what it is, right? So you have to have this interplay of opposites going on in order to find meaning and values and things like that. And so I kind of like always say that while I'm ultimately a non-dualist, I'm also very accepting of dualism as well, because the dualism is what gives us all of our meaning and things of that nature. Now, one of the problems though that I've had conversations with people kind of recently, and I don't think I've told you about this, Sophia, but I was talking to one person who was mentioning that he's actually having a problem with non-dualism, because what's happening is if you think about what is non-dualism, it's the sense that reality is fundamentally one thing. Like the division between self and other, good and evil, me and the world, is not ultimate. It's sort of like conceptual, right? But the problem is that when you look at it that way, if you really take that serious, then when you see the Hitlers of the world and the bad things of the world, then in a way you have to take the blame for all that stuff. You have to say that, well, if reality is non-dual, then that means that we have to take the bad stuff on board too. That, you know, how do we reconcile with that? And especially when we start talking about addressing current political problems in America right now. Like, are you aware of the Buddhist monks walk for peace movement that's going on right now, Alex?
I've seen headlines, so I'm aware of something like that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're pushing a more non-dual approach. So they're saying that, look, America's going through a lot of unrest and everything, but what we need to do is each individual needs to find peace. And the way we find peace is not to always look at the disparaging and the dichotomies and the opposites and always letting that stuff steal our joy and steal our peace. But we need to kind of have a more compassionate view and see that we're all one. You know, I'm even in your personal experience, you know, I'm one with this experience that I'm having right now. You know, just pay attention to your breath, pay attention to your footsteps, and have that inner, and just build that non-dual muscle. And that will trickle into society to make society more non-dual in its approach. And then maybe we can address problems like, you know, all these things that we talk about, identity politics and stuff like that. Is that how you approach topics like say the trans issues and racism and all these sort of tribal situations?
I would say this. Because I put empathy at the forefront of my politics to begin with. So like I think that because we all are spiritual, for like, I hate using that word, but I'm just going to say spiritual, because all I'm saying is we have a subjective mind. That's not like we're not products of machines or something. we should approach things first with like, not with hate or anything, but there's a pragmatic side to this too. And I think that most of the culture war is manufactured. One thing that my politics have evolved over the last 10 years since I started the channel. And I think that we need to develop class consciousness. I'm a bit of a socialist. So I think that most of the culture war is manufactured to distract us from actually coming together. So I don't get too bent out of shape about certain things. Like, I don't have a problem with trans people necessarily. I mean, I understand that the activists sometimes are funded to make people get upset and distract everybody. But ultimately, backing up for a second, even with Buddhism, like, and their approach to things, I because I'm an idealist, I have engaged with a lot of Buddhist thinkers, but I'm also frustrated by a lot of their philosophy. And I personally think that Buddhism, really, in the religious form, equates to a type of soft nihilism. And I don't think that like the answer to everything is just to be like, well, this is my peace and I just need to have my own, like, be happy in my own life and stuff. Like, sometimes we should be angry and pissed off about like what's going on. Like, Nazi Germany, perfect example. Like, what would a bunch of Buddhist monks do with the Nazis? Just try to meditate them away? Like, sometimes,
Right.
and this is what I never felt any comfort from these Eastern traditions because there's no guidance on, like, I don't want to engage in violence if I don't have to. I don't want to hurt anybody. But sometimes, like, if someone's coming at you and you got to protect your family or something, you got to engage in a defensive violence. And in that case, like, I find no guidance from these Eastern traditions on how to actually do that. So, and like, consciousness. And so my point is, we're not experiencing a non-dualistic world. I don't know what that is. I've never had a psychedelic experience or a meditative experience where I suddenly felt like I was everyone simultaneously. So the human condition as such is that we are in a state of dualism. We can feel physical pain. People can be tortured. And this is a messy world. So like this, I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't. But like, we also should be, it's just Buddhists, they often feel like they're just saying like, like, don't get upset about certain things. And like, no, we should be all fucking be angry. Look at what's happening right now. Like, I'm definitely not a fan of the Trump regime or anything. So I'm a Canadian just spectating on American politics. But when I see like what's going on with ICE and all this other shit, I'm like, well, people should be fucking pissed off. And like, you got to do something at some point. Otherwise, you're going to be the last people left when they come for you. Right. So I guess I wish I had more spiritual answers here. But I think like, anger can have a purpose and can be, sometimes you need to get angry to deal with problems, I guess.
I agree.
So
I agree. Anger can definitely be healthy.
Right. Yeah.
And it's totally natural. It's like, when you protect your children, you protect your self, the primary directive is to survive, so that you can procreate and move along in life and keep the species alive. Even though 99% of all species eventually died out, they still had that prerogative to, survive and adapt, which requires fighting and things of that nature, in order to do just that. The the non-dual nature, there's a logical way to come at it. That's one way. But a psychedelic trip will definitely. Go ahead, Sophia.
I think it's not so much about denying anything dark or our shadow. It's more about acknowledging it and being able to be in control over your own faculties. Anger in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Anger lets you know that you're being disrespected or that you're being violated. It's just another signal, and the way you respond to it, that depends on you. But to say, oh yeah, just don't worry about it, just, and just completely remove yourself from everything.
Just kill your ego.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. What good is killing the ego?
What does that even mean?
Ego is a survival mechanism that we need to move around practically in this physical realm. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget about our inner light, I would say, the ability to self-reflect. So there just needs to be a balance. I'm all about balance. You can get
And
angry,
integration.
but you need to, yeah, it's all about balance but that's how you get to the balance, when you integrate it properly, and you become fully aware of it, so that your urges and desires just don't run away with you, so you know how to put a leash on things, but use these things in a controlled manner. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That makes great sense. Also, like, there's no like when it comes to engaging in violence, like I believe like it's good to do it to stop your enemy, but then there's no point to like we don't need revenge or anything like that. Like a lot of people, I think, like if there's somebody that's a bad person, and I know that fundamentally they're like coming from the same mega mind that we're all from, like I would engage with them like to stop whatever they're doing, but then just that's the end of it. Like whereas other people, they get caught up in vengeance and ego, and then they want to inflict pain on the people that inflicted on them and all that stuff. And really ultimately it's just about preventing whatever they're doing and then stopping there.
Right, because then
Yeah.
We're
otherwise
all
you're just
one.
continuing the cycle of violence, and it does take a certain type of self-discipline, because we are
Yeah,
emotional beings. But I
exactly.
mean, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a fine line between bad habits and just real justifications for anger and outrage and things like that. We live in outrage culture, and one of the things, especially here in America, people get addicted to revenge. I've noticed, even
Yeah.
myself. I've got to watch it. It's like sometimes when you're engaging with people on social media, it's a real slippery slope. It's a real easy trap to be like, well, I want to show that this person is stupid and I'm right. So I'm going to punish him for his statement, and I'm going to own him on the social media just as a
Yeah.
form of revenge. And you do this constantly enough, you're integrating the wrong shit in your life to where you're no
For
longer
sure.
at peace with yourself or others or the world. You're always in a bad relationship with reality, because you're constantly fighting with folks about shit that really doesn't matter really at the end of the
Yeah.
day. And so it's just really crazy. Dave says, what is the URL? That's the backstage pass, man. So if you want to come backstage and ask questions, click on the link, and you'll be
That's why.
backstage. You know how it works, Dave.
That's why I only go so far with contrarians. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like at some point you have to decide. You have to choose your battles wisely, or it is going to rob you of your inner peace. You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The culture war is like largely people that just want revenge, like on that, like on both sides. Like a lot of 10 years ago, a lot of the woke people, I felt like they were people who got bullied in high school, and then now they wanted to like bully other people back. But now, like conservative people that are commenting on my channel all the time, they're living in in 2016, and they're just mad about the way like some woke person talked to them 8 years ago, and like so they're all these people are just consumed by some petty vengeance, drive.
Beta.
Yeah, yeah, cuck, all those words.
Yeah, you're a cuck. you know yeah, you've got all this. What's that all about? Like, what's all this manly stuff that came up all of a sudden?
Oh
I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like you said, it's a reaction to a lot of stuff, like, and then you see a lot of these viral YouTube personalities, like Andrew Tate and people
yeah.
like that just it's like, yeah, man, screw women, man. They need to learn to be accountable. Women, they make wrong decisions and choices in life, and then all of a sudden we have to pay for it. It's like they forget that
Uh,
you're part of the problem. It's like, does
I,
anybody ever want to take accountability? No, of
yeah.
course not.
Well, I feel so bad for like Gen Z and younger people, because culture is what it is, and they're um, a lot of people are raised in like environments where they don't have any good role models, and so when younger people get sort of like pulled into the Andrew Tate stuff. Like I feel bad for them, but I can understand. But sometimes you meet an older person, like over 35, who's like an Andrew Tate fan, and you're like, what is wrong with you, man? Like,
Not
how did that happen?
Yes.
It's
These
so
old
cringe.
people, like you'll see them at,
even older than
man,
that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Bro.
like what is up with that?
It's immaturity, man. People are lost and insecure, and there's a lot of arrested development, and these
Definitely.
divisive as these divisive you know whatever ideologies that are constantly being introduced. It's like everybody wants to be on the right side of history, but everybody's freaking lost. And I don't even know, like, sometimes I'm just like, it's not that I want to like disconnect myself fully from it, because we can't, we got to do something, right? But I also can't immerse myself into that stuff to where I'm getting stuck into it, right? But I'm seeing this happening, and all I'm seeing is like a bunch of blind people fucking each other up, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much.
It's terrible.
Let me make a political. I don't know where you guys fall on the political spectrum, but I'll use idealism to kind of make a political argument here. North America is pretty bad for this in general, but America is even worse than Canada. America is like a hyper materialistic, consumer based country. It's like capitalism on steroids. So if you look at a city like New York City, for example, I think 1 in 4 children live in poverty, but they have 63 billionaires. So the extreme wealth mixed in with like extreme poverty is getting out of hand. So I'm like a light socialist in the sense that I think that everybody's sort of basic needs, like access to food and a roof, like that level of subsistence needs to be taken care of before you have like 63 billionaires in a city. So like I'm not a communist or anything, but I think like America and Canada too, but especially America need more socialist policies, basically maybe a progressive wealth tax or something to take care of. I mean we're talking 1 in 4 children, right, are in poverty, like, and it's not because there isn't enough to go around. There is. It's a social organization problem, and it's late stage capitalism. So if we acknowledge, from an idealistic perspective, we can acknowledge that there's a spark of life or consciousness in living things that should be respected. And so we can make that a basis of like a shared spirituality, and from there we should take care of the basics before some people go crazy into the billions. That's
You're
my
a
take.
Marxist. You're a Marxist. What do you think,
Right.
Sophia?
I totally agree. I think that's very important. I see it the same way. We need to really look at what are we doing,
Yeah.
and we have to come
like,
together.
if you think about it, if we it's like Madonna said, we live in a material world, man. And so in this society, everything's about material. Everything's about, we're just robots, we're just machines. And really the value is in the things, the appearances, the shiny objects and shit like that. And people have put less emphasis on awareness and inner peace and in the inner subjective world. I mean, it's even in our science, in Western science, it's looked down upon to even talk about consciousness and the role of subjectivity in science, because the only thing that really matters is what you can verify scientifically. But can you verify that scientifically? It's like they don't really think this stuff through. And it really is, I agree that there has to be more compassion and humanity and consciousness in the way we do things. Like even the way that you approach business, like you can work with capitalism, but you can also understand that there are other factors besides just the bottom line. Like say the environment. If our capitalism is fucking up the environment, how is that going to eventually affect the bottom line? If we're constantly making other people angry and creating out groups, in groups, how does that affect our bottom line? Do you ever think about that? Why is it they're so narrowly focused? Like, try to look
One of,
at, you know,
I
Yeah.
think one of the problems is, I think one of the problems is that the people that are greedy as fuck and want to stay rich, they profit off of you being an unconscious being. And so people got to stop eating everything that's thrown to them, every little ideology, because I feel like it's more nefarious than we actually think it is. I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, and I think that our consciousness is purposely targeted to keep us unconscious for the purpose of being exploited, and so
Oh, for sure. For sure.
we got to stop at some point and say, how long are we going to allow these people to exploit us? When are we going to say, hell no? You know what I mean? So I think that's a big problem, that we sit there and we just eat whatever the fuck they throw at us with their little fucking politics and ideologies and every article that comes across our screen. Like, start thinking for yourself, like, question these things more, because at the end of the day, it's these billionaires and millionaires that you think they're going to change their ways and let go of their wealth. No, like, the only way we can make a difference, though, it's like, you have to starve the system. You got to stop giving to it.
Yeah,
You know what I
despite
mean?
what she's saying, Alex, despite everything that she's saying, the dirty little secret is that me and Sophia used to have a channel dedicated to conservative principles not very long ago. And the thing is, there's certain principles we really held on to. And the dirty little secret, though, on that is that, like, right now, like, I'm educated. I have a lot of experience in IT work, computers, stuff like that. I've been unemployed now for about 6 months. And, listening to my libertarian friends, my conservative friends, they'll say, oh, all you have to do is bring a skill set to the marketplace and a desire to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and boom, you'll be in there. There's nobody holding you back but you. I've been unemployed for 6 months. These people don't give a shit about your education, about your skill set. It's all about who you know, the network, all of that shit. What do you think about that?
So, two things. I've been unemployed without stable employment since I got laid off during the pandemic. So when I started my Freebird Media channel 9 years ago, I was in a Jordan Peterson video that went viral, standing beside him when all this stuff took off. So my channel was inspired by Jordan Peterson. So I was actually in the anti-woke camp at the start of all this. And I was like very influenced by libertarianism and all that as well. And then over time, now I come to see it as a complete joke. But this has been like a 9-year evolution. So yeah, I can relate to you, like, basically 100% on that. Also, unfortunately, Scott, I gotta tell you, I apologize for this. I'm really sorry, but my phone is telling me that it's down to like 5% battery. I had a full battery when I started this interview, but like I told you, like, technically I don't have a whole lot ties into my unemployment situation, but basically I just have this phone to work with, and I thought it was going to last for a couple hours, and it's probably going to die in like 5 minutes, and I really apologize for that, because I could keep talking for like hours still. So I can either charge it and rejoin the conversation in a bit, or like we can do another interview soon. But I thought I would have a lot more time on this phone, and the battery's already starting to go.
No problem. What do you think,
That's
Sophia?
StreamYard.
Yeah, that's StreamYard. It's a resource hog here. But yeah, one thing I want to do, I want to continue to collaborate with you on different things, and we can talk about making different videos and discussions and things like that. I definitely want to do that. As for today, what is your timeline looking like, Sophia? Do you want to keep on going and let them join maybe later, or do you want to just do something?
I'm good. Our plans were canceled due to the rain in Texas. Everything shuts down when it's raining. So I don't have anything to do. With that being said, I definitely appreciate you coming on our show, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's very important, and I would definitely love to continue to collaborate with you. And we'll go from there.
Call back in, man. When you get your phone charged up, Joel, our resident contrarian, he wants to ask you some questions.
Sure. If I can disconnect right now and just start charging my phone and get maybe in half
Okay.
an hour join again, and then I'll have
Sure.
more time. Okay, so I'll be
Absolutely.
back
Yeah.
in 30 minutes. Okay.
Okay,
I'll
brother.
see you soon.
Yeah, man. Yep.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, man. That's cool. He was a great guy. Great guy.
Great
Learned a
guy.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And what did Joel just say?
Oh, he just wanted to jump on and ask some questions. So that's cool because
Okay.
I want people to engage. You know, I want some engagement and some pushback and some as usual. You know. So, and Dave too. If you have any questions, you can always call in as well. And then Exum Music says, as Neil deGrasse Tyson said, it would take less money to save the Earth than to get people living on Mars. For real, man. And yeah, because it's like if you can terraform Mars and ship millions and
But
billions
that's
of
because
people.
they're too fucking greedy and that they'll never change. You know, they'd rather sacrifice the earth for their fucking greed. You know,
Hell
I mean,
yeah.
it's terrible, man. They're just greedy bastards.
Well,
And they
I
really
heard
think
Elon Musk.
think
Elon Musk though
they're really,
said he changed his mind and said he doesn't
yeah, he
want to
better
terraform Mars.
because he know that shit's stupid. He was just selling a fucking dream to the rich folks because yeah, they really think that they are so smart that they can somehow escape Earth, and instead of changing their fucking ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just make Earth better. Hey, Dave, how you doing, brother?
Hi.
Hey, Dave.
I'm doing great. You guys have had a wonderful discussion so far. I have really enjoyed it. And I mostly agree with you guys completely. It's very insightful. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's been fun, man. It's been a lot of
Yeah, it's
fun.
been a very good discussion. I think the trend Alex had of going toward a dualism and non-dualism as compared to a monism is a beautiful thing, the way he's doing it. And so
Yeah,
one of the
exactly.
problems I have is how do I raise conflict in a conversation that I agree with? You see the problem?
Right. Because as you say, like monism, you have to pick one or the other, which is part of the problem, right?
It's exactly the problem, yes. There's basically, I think there's three basic morality structures that are fairly important to clarify. One of them is needs-based minimalism. Another is property acquisition, and the other is family. And I see that the two monistic ones are always self-centered. Aren't they always? Do you agree or think that that's a reasonable idea?
Yeah, I think so. What do you think, Sophia?
I don't really know because I'm sorry, I don't exactly know what monism is. I'm not that educated. I'm a natural philosopher, so I just freestyle, and I have no idea what we're talking about. So break it down for the dumb people.
Okay, well let me see if I can explain this directly because it really is a simple idea. Basically, let's start 10,000 years ago. If two tribes came together in the desert near a well, they would each send one guy out and they would talk about it. And what they would do is compare genealogies rather than fight for the well. And eventually, they would start bullshitting, of course, and they would both agree. And everybody has an Uncle Ahmed or whatever. So they would all get together and share the well. But resources are limited, and one must protect themselves and their families. So the Jews came up with this idea of how to distinguish themselves from everybody else. It basically came up with the idea of circumcision, which definitely shows that they are separate. Then they add the idea of a one God and no idols, which separates them from everybody else. So you have this one group.
Yeah.
You end up with this one group that is very isolated and divisive with the rest of the world, but it acts very dualistic internally. Then you've got Plato talking about, gee, you can convince anybody of anything in the cave if they really don't know, with his analogy in the cave. So the two of these things are added together with the idea that one must always be right. Oneness must always be right. So monotheism and monism is a major archetype in this society, usually reflected in one's overall practicality or spirituality and belief systems. Usually, does that make some sense?
Yeah. So I guess
Or
I would
like,
say, like I always say, there has to be a middle path. There has to be some kind of balance.
Well, the
I'll be right
balance
back. I
that,
need to take a bathroom break. I'll be right back.
well, one
Go
of the
ahead.
natural balances, have fun. One of the natural balances occurs with the family, because in the dualism that I think I try to keep proposing is the idea you have your monistic God, and that's just fine, and it doesn't really matter the form of the God. Consciousness is very important, but I get hungry. Do you get hungry too? I mean, that basic connection. Do you need supper? Is
Right.
that
But I don't think that hunger justifies pretending that your family is more important than the next one's family. You see what I'm saying? We all get
exactly?
hungry. And so
Exactly.
the only reason there's a scarcity is because we forgot how to share, I would say. When you're starting to be some kind of hoarder and you think you're chosen by God to be privileged, I think that's where the problem comes in, when you decide that you're more important than the next person. You see what I'm saying?
Agreed. Agreed totally. And but historically, I'm just trying to paint the ideas out. Um, because
Right.
but currently you're absolutely right. But Neo-Confucianism, a guy named Lao Tzu, pointed out that the relationships Confucius came up with were very, very important. And those relationships should extend from deep spirituality in Buddhism within yourself up to the mandate of heaven controlling the entire society, in which the people have the right to revolt. The king does not have the divine right to put down tyranny, rebellion, which is the divine right of kings. So, yes, I agree. And in that philosophical point of view, you see exactly what you're talking about. The idea that family, uh, family relationships, self relationship, extended family relationships, community, tribal relationships are all very, very important. And that you're right, we should be able to share, and we need to share, and that's the way it should be. However, in our current society, people are confused, and they are basically bullshitted to the point where they don't remember what is right and wrong. They simply know what gives them
Yeah.
excitement.
Yes, and I think that we have a misconception as well, a very big one. We think that domination somehow equals superiority, and it's a survival instinct. I get that, but it's a survival instinct that should have died out a long time ago once we figured out how to cooperate. And we know that with one another, right? And we know that that's the species that usually evolves, the one that learns how to cooperate, right? And so I think that we have this misconception that domination equals survival. And it does,
Well,
but it also leads to, go ahead.
I can't agree with that because Dr. Sapolsky says 95% of species are tournament based. They fight for the right to mate, and then the female has to accept that, or wants to accept that. Actually, wants to accept that. 95%. There's only 5% of mammals that actually have evolved along cooperative lines. Okay, so most species really are might makes right beyond the family or kinship level.
Is that true
In
for
our
humans too?
no, we're 50-50. It's amazing. I don't know if I can say this on the air, but it's amazing how we are just in the middle. Okay, if you take a look at a cooperative species of ape and a tournament species of ape, and then you take a look at us, it's amazing how we have evolved. Uh, Specifically, one can look at testicle size. In cooperative species, testicles are fairly small because the male only has to fertilize the female once or twice, and they raise the families together and both expend roughly the same amount of calories. In tournament species, the male has to mate with every female he can and basically ignore the female he's mated with. So he has fairly large testicles. Human beings are right in the middle. I mean, it's amazing. It really is kind of bizarre how balanced that combination has been. And I can't understand at all why that is true. I probably can find something, but I haven't understood that at all. But that seems to be the actual information.
I just did a search just to kind of ask ChatGPT, did humans survive more for cooperation or by dominating? And the answer I got back was, it says the short answer, humans survive primarily because of cooperation, but cooperation often required the capacity for domination. So it's not either or, it's hierarchical. So cooperation, although was the core survival strategy, you had to use abilities to dominate in order to cooperate.
That makes sense.
Hey, Joel just joined as well. Do you have any thoughts on that, Joel? Joel's still muted. Oops. But yeah, so how's it going, Joel?
I just had an internet hiccup. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yep, we can hear you now. What were your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, I'm just kind of listening in on all the evolution stuff. I don't think I disagree. I think sometimes we might want to think about that. Sometimes an individual dominates a group, and sometimes a group dominates the groups around it. But any group that dominates the group around it is using cooperation to do that. So it's kind of it's not an either or, when it comes to domination or cooperation, a lot of times they're hand in hand.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like compared to other large mammals, humans, we're pretty physically weak. Like we don't have claws, fangs, we don't run very fast, we have long childhood dependency. What we do have is that extreme social intelligence. So it could be like stuff like food sharing or collective child rearing, group hunting, social bonding that can kind of give us skills that might take the place of big claws and physical dexterity and speed and things like that.
Yes. Can I suggest too that Aristotle suggested there's 6 forms of government, and he outlined these 6 forms of government in such a pattern as to agree with our conversation quite a bit. And the 6 forms really are 3 forms, whether or not people are virtuous or corrupted, and that would really play well into this conversation, I think.
Yeah. Well, right now in the States, the feeling I get is I like to say we're more divided than ever, but then again, we did have a civil war at one time. But we are pretty divided on a lot of things, though, it seems like. Do you think that social media has a lot to do with that, like just the internet?
Yes, I do. I think it does. And the reason why is because you're not actually outside playing. Children are not outside playing with each other. There's no playgrounds in great use. People tend to be isolated. Do you really know your neighbors really well? I don't know my neighbors really well. I don't. They are. And when I was a kid, I remember walking between hedgerows or between the yards, and I would know everybody. I knew everybody. But here, I don't. We don't do that anymore. In fact, every house that I see has a fence around its backyard. Okay, none of them are open to everybody. So there's a big change in society. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's true. Very true. I see that because as a child of the 70s and 80s, we used to go out and play. We knew all our neighbors. We used to know everybody in the neighborhood. And and then some. And then it's like nowadays, kids are very sheltered, comparatively speaking. At least in my experience, it seems that way. Seems like kids are, you know, more structured, more protected. Neighbors don't know each other, and yeah. But I think beyond that, though, there's just this whole echo chamber society we live in, where everybody's kind of embedded in their own sort of echo chambers. And, you know, a lot of that is just influenced by social media and just that dynamic, you know, us against them. And when you look at like these political discussions, like you're either MAGA or you're, you know, super liberal, progressive Joe Biden type of guy. Like,
Yeah,
there's very little room for nuance a lot of times.
yeah, and it takes a duality to have nuance, because a duality can pin down two ends of a spectrum, and you can then use that spectrum. Monism doesn't do that. Monistic arguments are always collinear, and they always cancel each other out or end up with one or the other. Those are the only choices of the idea of everything lying on the same line, or the single line, or something like that. And that's absolutely true. I have seen the
Yeah,
same thing
I
happen.
don't.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dave. I was
Oh,
just trying to
in
jump in
China.
there with you. Go ahead.
Okay, but let me just say one more thing. In China,
Yeah, yeah.
they have limited how much children can play with the social media. I believe that's happening in a few other countries as well.
Let me ask you this just for our audience. When it comes to monism, what do you mean by monism? Just for the audience. Dave, did you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. I thought you were asking the audience.
No, I was asking you, define, sorry, I got something in my throat. Define monism for us really quick.
I think the root of it is mono, or single, and mono, and so it's the study of or the philosophy of oneness, and that also tracks out to monotheism, oneness in religious philosophy as well. So it always tracks down to one idea and one
Okay.
concept.
Yeah, so like whenever the problem I used to have when we used to talk about this, I used to always think of monism like reality is fundamentally one thing. So I used to always think in the sense of metaphysics, like whatever exists ultimately really reduces to like one unified thing, either matter or consciousness, for example, or some, like they call it with a neutral monism, like some unknown property would ground reality. But I think what you're talking about is in the sense of monism versus dualism versus pluralism, like that sort of idea, right?
Exactly. Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Monism
Yeah,
versus
I have not heard
non-dualism
those
versus.
terms used that way until I heard Dave use them that way. To me, that's a
Yeah, me too.
totally unique usage. It almost seems as though, like, when there's a gray area, you want to say that's dualism, and when something is black and white, then it's a monist, yes or no, or something. It's kind of a
Mhm.
weird, it's kind of a strange way. I mean, I definitely think it's worth distinguishing areas where we think things are cut and dry and where we think there's a gradient, you know. And but I mean, these terms, you know, I'm sure they get used widely, but um, the places that I'm most familiar with them, hearing about them, is when it comes to ontological statements about reality, like whether reality is one thing or made of more than one substance is usually the
Right.
question between monism and dualism. And it doesn't have to be just that, but it is a little, I'll admit I'm a little confused every time I hear you use them that way, Dave.
Well, I always consider it both, because I see the mind as completely free, and I see our bodies as limited by the environment. So I always think of it as both. I think you've got me basically right. You may not accept my idea, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. And thank you very much for at least giving my ideas a thought. But yeah,
Well,
I
I
think
think
both.
I agree with you about that. That is the case, that we experience that kind of reality. I just think that whether or not reality is monistic or dualistic doesn't really seem to come down to whether or not we are having the experience that we're having.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but
Right.
why not? I mean, how doesn't it? Why would you still want to go to a monism?
It's not about what we want. It's about what we know or can say we have good reason to think. And normally we would want to say, well, if reality is this way, then it must be because it's this X or Y is true, right? But if we can't make that argument, if we can't draw that line between, the premise and the conclusion, then, what are we doing?
Well, how can you get rid of the dualism? How can you melt that down into one thing? Because the laws of thermodynamics seem to always apply to our physical beings, but the laws of consciousness allow for anything, pretty much. And we use it. We use them both. So
I don't
why
get rid
isn't
of
that what it really is? It's plain that we may have started 14 billion years ago as a single point. And it's plain that in a couple of 100,000 billion years, it may end up that way, or basically dark. But if it really is both, if our reality does seem to be both, and whenever we test it, we see both, then why would we want to explain anything other than that? Why do we want to be a single thing? What's the value in it?
Well, again, it's not about what we want, but when you say both, what are the two things you're talking about?
That which complies with thermodynamics and that which does not.
Are you talking about the difference between material and immaterial things?
I'm talking the difference
Is that
between consciousness
is that the
and mind.
dualism?
I'm talking the difference between consciousness and hunger. It comes down to the difference between consciousness and hunger. A free mind and our physical needs. We always have both. I can't think of a case where we only have one or the other.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that these are kind of like constants within your experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so why would
I
want to build a philosophy other than that? I would want to understand what I've got in my
Let me try to cut you off, because that's not at all what the argument for monism is about. Monism is not saying that either of those things isn't real, or that you're not experiencing those things. Monism is just saying all of those things are one big thing.
Yeah, they collapse into one thing.
How do they? But there's no evidence of that, and it doesn't help us at all to do that.
Well, then you just have to establish how you differentiate between objects and between identities, because when you start digging into that, that becomes an almost impossible thing to do in reality. I mean, Scott's always talking about mereological nihilism for that reason. It's very difficult to establish what makes an object when its parts are constantly changing, and it's kind of like it's only an object from our viewpoint. If we were much bigger or much smaller, we wouldn't even recognize it or whatever. These things are not as easy to do. And that's why some people say, well, okay, the objects don't exist, only the stuff that the objects are made of. Well, the stuff that all objects are made of is just, that's what they mean when they say one thing is everything. It's just one big glob of stuff, and it's kind of forming into this and that object, and you and me maybe as well. That's kind of the materialist monist viewpoint, right? Is that
Okay.
everything, including our minds, are all just kind of arrangements of this one big thing. It's just a glob
Okay.
of physical stuff.
Okay, but I don't see the leap.
Like
I don't
Dave,
see
let
how you
me
go
ask
from the dualistic world to the monistic world.
like
I don't
Dave,
see the
let me
leap.
ask you this. Like under
But you do understand that the term is being used that way, right?
Yes, I do understand the term is being used that way. Yes, I absolutely
Okay,
do.
yeah.
And I see why, too. I think I see
It's
why
about
that archetype
ontological
exists.
substance. It's the difference between saying I believe there's one ontological substance or saying I think there's more than one ontological substance. Because a lot of people believe that too. A lot of people believe that there's material substance and then there's an immaterial substance that are, minds or souls or whatever are made of. And that's the typical kind of dualism that you hear. That's the two things that are being referred to. It's about ontological substances.
Exactly. And I find that to be
Okay.
correct. Yes, and I
Okay.
find that to be correct. I'm one of those guys. Yes. Yes.
yeah, like
Meaning that you are a dualist in that sense.
Yes, I'm a dualist in that sense, that there's both the material
Okay.
and the non-material.
Okay.
Yes. And
yeah,
I
so
can't
you'd be
see a way to reduce it to one thing until everything goes cold. Or I look at the Big Bang. But at this time, what's the point of philosophy at all? I mean, the reason we have philosophy is to understand our world so that we can live better in it and get more out of it and be happy with it. Is that right? I don't know what the point of philosophy is at this point, is the question. Because if the point of philosophy is to do those things, isn't it more important to recognize what it really is as opposed to trying to boil it down to one thing?
well, you're doing philosophy when you make that statement or ask that question, you're engaging in philosophy already. So in a way, it's unavoidable.
But why?
Because
I think the
philosophy is
answer.
just the art. It's like an art of thinking about stuff. It's just really thinking about stuff. It's like you've got analytical philosophy, which is like just analyzing between different models or ideas that are floating around out there. And you've got philosophy of how you direct and guide your life. Like my philosophy is always put your best foot forward, whatever you're doing. That's a philosophy. That's a way of thinking or approaching things.
And why
Also,
are
I
you
guess
doing that?
the reason why is because you want to know, you're curious, you want to learn, you want to
Yeah,
understand.
that's what I was going to say. You're curious.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're curious, why would you want to go to monism when you don't see monism?
You keep saying want as if people are just saying, what would I prefer? And that's not the point here.
Right.
Well, I see monism as an answer to a problem. I don't see monism as what it actually is. So I'm asking, why would you want a monism? Why would you argue for a monism as opposed to a dualism when in reality you can't see or experience a true monism?
It's a good question. Really, if you could say that about anything, you could say that about dualism, non-dualism. Why would you want dualism? Why would you want
I just don't
non-dualism?
really understand the premise when you say you can't see it. You can't see your mind either, but you know your mind exists. Unless you believe that it's an illusion.
But I hear you talking. I understand what you're saying. I see your mind through that. And I get hungry. I mean, the truth is what I actually see is both all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever
But
see just one.
Isn't that what monism says then? Like when you reduce it all, it just all is one thing. You may experience it as two things, but when it all comes down to it, it's all the same stuff.
No,
yeah, like Dave, if you hear, like, let's say you're looking at the screen, you're hearing my voice, you're feeling the air around you right now, you're feeling your breath go in your body and out, you're feeling hunger, you're feeling you're full or whatever the case may be. All of that exists. Does that exist in separate experiences, or is it all just one unified experience?
clearly separate experiences to me, and I don't see a reason to then add it all together as one thing, except the word universe. I mean, your word universe seems to work pretty well, but I don't understand the value of the monistic value. I mean, ontologically, knowledge tends to want you to stick with what is. And how we get that knowledge is what I'm asking. I'm asking an epistemological question. And that question is, what is the value of trying to say, and we all put it together as one big thing? What's the point of it?
Well,
The value would be if it was real, if it was a real description of reality, then knowing that would be the value, right? It wouldn't matter what we would prefer or the ramifications or, you know, the consequences of finding out that it's true. The point would be, oh, that's the case. Because I mean, reality is either made up of one thing or it's made up of more than one thing, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and whatever
would you rather know the truth?
Whatever the truth, right? Whatever the truth is has nothing to do with what we want it to be.
Yeah, but the truth
and that's the value, is that you want to know what the truth is.
Yeah, so the truth I see is dualistic. I feel dualistic. I see dualistic. Everything seems dualistic or non-dualistic or pluralistic.
But see, now you've slipped into using the word to talk about a different idea than the ontological reality. You're using it to say, well, you could look at this more than one way, dualistically.
Well, I'm saying that I see
and I agree with you. You can absolutely.
I feel it. I can look at it. So the question is,
you can feel it. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You can feel about things.
So why would I want to try to take the next step to monism? It doesn't seem to have any value. It doesn't even seem to be ontologically true.
But like that's the reason of philosophy, right? So you could ask, is it true that biologically separation is really achieved through differentiation and memory binding in your brain, like through the hippocampus? Could it be that that's the ontological truth and that all your perceptions are not really separate and that there's really something deeper going on, like a binding that your brain is doing? Could that really, and that's one thing. So, and it seems like a bunch of different things, but that could be the illusion. So philosophy would cause you to ask that question and say, no, I don't believe the biological story. I don't believe the physical story that the brain is binding all this information into a process that appears as separate experiences that I'm tagging mentally. That's not true because I don't experience any of that. All I know is I experience hunger. I experience the hearing of the voice, the air on my skin. Those are all separate experiences. So reality is separate. All of these things are dualistic. And so why would I even want to ask about the one thing going on? That's what philosophy is saying, is that.
And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. Why ask that one? Why? I can see the point of asking the question, but I don't see a value in the answer. And in the definition of truth, pragmatism is the third requirement. And there's no pragmatism in it.
Well, here's the value. One could say, well, if we look at everything ultimately as just a binding of experiences and everything like that, then maybe we could find more harmony. We could find more inclusivity in society. We could find more, we could project that sort of idea or that ideal onto how we treat others and stuff like that. Whereas if I looked at all this separation, someone could say, well, screw that. We're all separate. We're all tribes. We're all different. And so my value changes in accord with my philosophy on that.
Well, that's a fair question, but the answer seems to still be dualistic. It still seems to be the mother has to take care of her children. It still seems to be that is a nice idea that we have a single unit, but every time I look at it, it comes back as a gee, I got everything in my head kind of thing, and now I can be totally self-interest. I can have total self-interest and no empathy whatsoever. That's a tournament position. And I
But again,
can't
those
see a value in
things
that.
could be the case. Those things could be the case whether the reality is made of one thing or made of more than one thing.
Well,
The
both are
things that
true.
you guys are pointing to and talking, the things that you guys are pointing to and talking about just are not connected to whether or not, whether at the ontological level these things are monistic or not. I mean, if it's just a different conversation, that's fine. But I'm
It's
just trying to clear that up.
At
Yeah,
the
'cause some-
Yeah, I
ontological level,
agree.
you're talking about knowledge, right? The
No,
acceptance
no.
of knowledge fundamentally.
No, we're talking about what makes things real when we're talking about ontology.
Yeah, so if
What
that's true,
you were
so
like Dave,
what
you were
makes things
asking about
real?
the value. You were asking about what is the value of the answer, whatever that answer turns out to be. What would be the value? And all I'm bringing out is that you could say, well, everything is bound into one unified experience, and so that makes for more unity. Or someone could take that to say, well, that just means I can be narcissistic and I can be only caring about my own unified experience. Or it could lead you. So the values are subjective. The values, you can find value in just about anything and turn it any way you want. But
Exactly.
that was
And you
All
just
I'm
use the
saying
word
though is,
or each time
I'm just saying,
instead of
I'm
and.
just trying to see how, if everything was one thing, then why would that mean that you can't have a separate experience though?
right. Right.
Like we're all
Because
on Earth and we're all having a separate experience.
Yes, we
yeah,
are.
like
I
it doesn't
agree with that.
necessarily lead to that. Like if monism true, it doesn't necessarily lead to either dualism or non-dualism. Because you, like
No,
I say, you've
monism
got,
itself.
well, that's I guess that's the confusing part for Joel, is he's trying to figure out because you were saying monism leads to a more separateness, like either or sort of thing.
Yeah, monism ends up with one. You just said it. You literally said that you use the word or every time you came to a conclusion with monism. It's either
Yeah,
this
but
or that, not
that's
this
different
and
than
that.
the value. But that would be different than the value thing. Like you could be a materialist monist and still, it has no bearing on your morality or whatever. Same thing with, say, like a neutral monist or something like that. The
Then
same
it's not
way.
a monism. Then it's not a
Well,
monism.
that's what I'm saying
As
is
soon as you say there's something else, you dualized it. That's the dualization of it, isn't it?
well, maybe that's the crux of the problem, is that the way I understand monism, or always understood it, it's either or metaphysically, but it encompasses everything, which is, for you, it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is. For me, it's an and. It's both. It's not one or the other. And I can't see a valuable reason. I can't see a pragmatism in reducing to a monism, other than at either end of the universe or something like that.
Welcome back, Alex. Have you been listening up with the conversation so far?
Pardon me, sorry?
Were you able to keep up with the conversation up to now? Because we were going to ask you your opinion.
I apologize. I wasn't. Sorry. If you just ask me now, though, I can definitely respond.
Okay, cool. So what we've got, we were talking about monism. And the way I understand monism is it's a metaphysical claim. Like it's either neutral monism, or say materialistic monism, or an idealistic monism, for example. But I was making the claim that each of these people, if their philosophy is one of these monisms, it doesn't necessarily lead to one or the other in values. Maybe in metaphysics, sure, like the ontology. And so we have Dave on, who's kind of confused about that. He's saying, what is the value of, say, idealism, or what would be the value of materialism? What does that have anything to do with the fact that we have separate dualistic experiences. That's really what he's asking. Would that be correct, Dave? Like you're asking,
Yeah,
why would you want to even ask about the ontology since we all recognize a dualism in the world?
yeah, I agree. You've got me. You've got me right. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
I agree.
So how would you answer that, Alex? Because we're trying to figure out how to make a better world, you know?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is why I think that this question or topic is directly related to the issue of whether or not like mind at large is metaconscious, because like I use the term monism in a generic sense, not in any of those specific categories, just in the sense that everything is ultimately one interconnected thing. There's no like, whether or not you're talking about consciousness or physical particles, everything ultimately is one holistic system. So when it comes into like morality and stuff like that, it actually it opens up the question of, is mind at large or consciousness meta-conscious of us? Because I argue you could still be an idealist and a nihilist at the same time if the larger consciousness, or the mind at large, as Aldous Huxley referred to it, like if it's completely unaware of us, maybe it doesn't matter. Like maybe our situation is nihilism. But I speculate, that it is aware of us, and that our input, that through our conscious free will choices, actually determine like how this system continues to progress and to evolve. So I think like if we're all part of one system that's integrated, that isn't actually, there are no truly separate parts, then our decisions and our actions matter, because they're adding to the direction in which this system evolves, I guess, or devolves, however you want to look at it.
I hear you, and your own language itself shows the dualistic nature of the monism you're trying to point out, because you're trying to show that we're all part of this thing, and I recognize that. And as soon as you recognize that, you're dualistic.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm in a practice. I was getting at this earlier. Like, we, in the ultimate sense, I think the system's connected, but our experience as individual humans is definitely an experience of dualism. I'm not you and you're not me. So we're definitely living in a dualistic world, like by definition.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when you express the notion of being part of a monism, you're dualistic simply in that statement. It all turns into a dualism immediately, even though you're talking about a monism.
Yeah,
Can you talk about a monism singularly?
Saying, Dave, I'm confused by this, because what are you saying? Are you saying that you can't work as a team because you're a separate individual? Is that what you're saying?
No. That's a non-dualism to me. That's an emergent property. A team is a emergent property of individuals, and there's no problem with non-dualism. I have a problem with the idea that after you get through all the ideas of dualism and non-dualism and pluralism, once you get through all those ideas and you try to boil it down to a monism, you're defying Occam's razor. And it doesn't make sense. And you forget half the universe. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So you're saying that the dualistic nature of reality is very complicated. In other words, you've got all these different aspects, countless, trillions. So it's not very parsimonious. But when you start dwindling it down to a monism, then you're talking about something very parsimonious, something very, it's just one thing, monism, one thing. So you're trying to reconcile how that could even be possible.
I see cultures in which both have evolved. And since I see cultures that both have evolved, I was able to choose one or the other, and see why they both work the way they do. And it seems to me that the monism doesn't give any value, it's not pragmatic, and defies the third requirement of truth. I don't see a place where that's not true, except at the end of time, or at the beginning of time, or the whole universe, or whatever that is. Okay, because of multiverses and stuff. But I don't see value in that. I see that everybody tries to argue to that. A lot of people in our culture try to argue that point, but it does not take into account either the practicality if you're spiritual, and if you're spiritual, and if you're practical, it doesn't take into account spirituality. You have to have both, it seems like. So why not leave it there? Is all I'm really asking. Why not leave it there?
Well, that's where the philosophy comes in, because like the philosophy of science, and you're an engineer, Dave, so you're
Yes.
sort of scientifically minded, and you know that science prefers ontological simplicity, right? So like
Yes.
that's why it pushes towards that. So you say that there you don't know why. Do you know why science would push towards an ontological simplicity rather than a plurality?
Down to 3 basic laws of nature, yeah, but those still become a dualism. I can't see the jump from a dualism to a monism. There's no jump, in my opinion, that I can see, other than the exceptions I pointed out. I see that, yeah. So in engineering, we got to stick with the second law and the first law of thermodynamics. And in engineering, we have to accept the fact that some things defy the laws of thermodynamics, but those things that defy the laws of thermodynamics actually are embedded in something that does follow the laws of thermodynamics. And there might be more. There might be more.
Well, yeah, like the law of infodynamics.
What's infodynamics?
It's kind of like the law of thermodynamics, only regarding information, which is any sort of meaningful distinction that you can measure in science. So it's kind of like a mathematical equation, for example, quantum mechanics, the evolution of the wave function, all of these sort of things that, you know, where you get Newtonian physics, all of that kind of stuff. Though that's the law of infodynamics. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, that's kind of well accepted, especially in light of quantum mechanics, and ever since Heisenberg and Bohr and all those guys. So like, how does that reconcile? Like, because you're talking about you don't see the value in dwindling things down to a monism, but then it seems like science is sort of anchored into that, right?
Nope, I don't see that. Science is not anchored in that. Science is the philosophy of nature. The philosophy of nature is science. Science effectively is really only a process. Mathematics is really only a language, and from my point of view. So it doesn't.
Right. I understand that, but what it's describing is like the entropy of information systems, right? It tends to decrease over time or stabilize rather than increase without some sort of constraint. So this is framed as a kind of informational counterpart to the second law.
Yes, so that's the mind. Yes. Inductors and capacitors defy the second law of thermodynamics when looked at mathematically, even though they don't.
And I would agree with you that the equations are just describing it. This is why, like, what the founder of, I can't even think, Max Planck said that the matrix of the mind, you know, beyond the equations, beyond the quantum mechanics, there's this matrix of probability distribution, you know, which is kind of like one big thought, so to speak. So it's, again, whether you want to describe it that way or not, it's sort of describing a kind of monism, right?
Well, sure, but it's nice to hypothesize. It's fun to hypothesize, and I even say it might be. I don't say it's not. I say it might be. But I know that I live in a dualistic world, and philosophically, I get the things out of it that I need to show compassion, to show cooperation, rather than tournament behavior.
Dave, I have a question for you. What do you think of concepts like the Jungian idea of a collective unconscious? That, you know, or
I love his archetypes.
Pardon me, sorry?
I love his archetypes. He's great.
Okay,
Jung is wonderful.
Like I agree with, like, we live in a dualistic world. That's how I'm experiencing things right now. I'm not sure what the conflict is between dualism within monism is. Like, for all practical purposes, we're experiencing dualism, but I think that it's very possible that things come into existence, like Bohm's implicate order, or like these Jungian ideas that exist in a non-physical place, like manifest into the physical world, coming from this sort of larger mind that we're all downstream from. So, like, are you saying that you believe in just dualism? There's no like larger system, or what is your like take on it?
What you're calling a monism from that point of view of Jung's archetypes, I'm calling a non-dualism. I tend to see it as a grouping function, because if I'm looking at that greater unconsciousness, or I'm looking at the greater consciousness, depending on how you want to look at it, I feel it and see it too. But when I do that, I'm still looking at it. So it's two things. It's always two things. I can't be part of that. And if I become part of it, if I want oneness with that one thing, then I lose my own identity, don't I? So I agree with all of that. Yeah, I just don't see that last step. I think everything else makes sense.
Let me ask you this. Okay, let's take the example of electricity. Right? You see light, you see heat, you see motion, you see magnetism, and they all look different to you, right? We experience these things as these separate things.
Yes.
But at a deeper level, they are all electromagnetic processes, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's the same as monism. Like, that's what we're saying. You can still, there's still separateness at the same time. But when you break it all the way down, it's just all
Expressions.
the same stuff. Yeah.
Well, I see what you're saying, and I call those non-dualisms. I do see how emergent properties come out of things. I see how an atom is a subset of a molecule. So the emergent property of molecules emergent property of atoms is a molecule. I can see how the emergent property of molecules is an object. I can see how the mind is an emergent property of us. But I also say I don't know more than that, because Jung is right. I can see his collective unconsciousness. I can see his archetypes. But at the same time, I notice that I see that. And if I see that, then there's two things happening. So it never ends up as a monism. It ends up as a non-dualism. Very subtle difference, but important difference.
I'm not sure I understand the relevance, though. Like, I don't know if I agree or disagree with what you're saying, just because, like, as humans, we exist in a dualistic world. Sure. It just seems that, like, there's an intelligence perhaps that's, affects that world, that we're all smaller than, or like a hierarchy of intelligence, and there's stuff above us. So I agree with you. Like, from a human perspective, like, yeah, we're definitely in a dualistic situation. There's no denying that. But I also think, like perhaps physics and other scientific, like physical world makes sense when you realize everything's interconnected, right? Like, if you're not into monism, are you saying that, like, the physical world exists independently of consciousness, and it's just a bunch of separate particles floating around in some sort of existence?
There's no separation. I see that the consciousness that is beyond the physical existence is itself a thing, but it is a thing that is in cooperation with the physical. Therefore, there's two things again. Your very statement, the very way you said that, shows a dualism and a non-dualism from my perspective. It does not show a monism.
Dave, the fact that you're hard to understand lets me know you're probably a fucking genius. Hey, Joel, did you have questions for Alex as well? I need to get a sandwich real quick. I'm gonna be right back.
Yes, I have been working on this philosophy of mine since mid-70s. So I'm not a genius here. I just simply take everybody else's stuff and I try to give them the credit. The only thing in my philosophy that's unique to me is the word datum. Other than that, I'm using everybody else's ideas.
Sorry, the word what?
Datum. D-A-T-U-M. Datum. I don't know if you... datum is a engineering concept. It is also a mathematical concept. It's a concept in science. And it's a concept in thought. It's a concept in truth. and I'm adding the word datum to the concept of truth. It is that information that makes up the background to allow you to assume that your fact or proposition is correct. It is the submatter of a fact or proposition. If you go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, definition 1 is what I'm referring to. But I also support all the other definitions that are there. It's a very versatile word. What can I say? It's a very dualistic word. Excuse me. But that's where it comes from. Okay? The word datum. Yeah. And the point of a datum is that it's like, it's not just a collection of information that you're working from for that particular proposition or fact. It is also a graduated scale. There's something called geometric dimension and tolerancing. It's an ASME standard of how you do drafting, how you actually draw pictures of mechanical parts and other things. And it is a very valuable point. It's a very valuable tool to use because it minimizes error in your design. It minimizes machining error. That's where I got it from originally. The Navy had me working with that standard for a year. So I got to know it pretty well. And that's where I came up with it. And that's all there is that was. And I see, once I do that, once I see that I can see different datums. For example, the Upanishad is a wonderful datum for Jainism, Vedicism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. The Mandate of Heaven out of Mankas's, the Book of Mankas, is a wonderful example of Confucianism and eventually the Mandate of Heaven as a way of running a large society. Those are each separate datums. But the datum that encroached on our host is hunger. His body started interrupting him. He had to get a sandwich. Okay, that interruption is critical. Again, the dualism has more value to me as a base than does an idea of a monism, because I get to see God as the universe and part of me. I always come back to this mathematical idea. If A plus B is added together and neither one is 0, then A plus B cannot equal A or B. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. If that is true, then I have something else. Now let A be the natural world around me and B be my mind. If I simply add those two things together, I come up with a surface. I can actually describe a sphere of my own reality where I actually see, and on the outside of it, I can see my behavior. Okay, I can actually see those two things. And I call that a sliver. And I call that encompassing what I call a divine spark. And we all have that divine spark. So I see God as something bigger than nature, but I also see God as emergent from nature. And that still fits as a dualism.
I'm not sure that I even disagree with any of this, but like to just clarify, like human experience is grounded in dualism. So I'm not debating like dualism as a form of that it's part of our experience or anything. I mean, I think when I talk about monism, I'm talking about like a huge top-down perspective of like the universe. But as far as a human being goes, like, yeah, we exist in a dualistic world, and that's we have to adapt to dualism as part of our reality. I'm not debating any kind of like dualistic practicality or anything like that.
I agree, and we're agreeing on that. And I'm asking, why is the monistic question of value then? Okay, if the world is not on the back of a tortoise, kind of thing.
It might.
Yeah. Yes.
I think he froze up.
I think monism solves a few problems. For example, You know, dualism has to explain how does an immaterial mind interact with physical matter, for example. Because you yourself say, I have a mind and I'm a physical body and I get hungry.
I
So
agree with that. Yeah.
if that's two completely separate, unrelated things, then how do you explain how they interact with one another at the same time?
I see that as the non-dualism. That's why I love Dub so much. Why I love Dub Shine, because he coined that term to me. He introduced me to that term, non-dualism. Okay, and that is the result that I see there. Yeah, I don't see a monism. I see a non-dualism.
But see, nobody knows what you mean when you say that. You've got to say what you mean. You can't just say non-dualism as if it's an answer. How do two things work together? You can't just say non-dualism. You have to explain how two different things work together.
Okay, two things work together via a process called energy transfer. At one point in time, 14 billion years ago, everything in the universe was one thing. There is a monism right there. After the Big Bang, that big ball of energy expanded. Things began to happen and turn into different things. Energy transfer seems to be the way things interact with each other to a great degree. And that energy transfer is either subjective or objective. And that energy transfer is the basis of morality as well. So I can see that as true.
So here's the question.
I just want to point out one thing, Dave. Non-dualism is generally seen as a form of monism. That's what's confusing me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I see that. I see non-dualism slightly differently. I see it as the grouping of things and the emergent property. The emergent property of things is that non-dualistic thing.
Okay. Here's a good way to put it, Dave. Here's a good way to the reason why monism has a value.
Yes.
Okay. So let's say the non-dual, you're going to call it non-dualism. Let's just leave monism out for right now, temporarily.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Because the way you're understanding non-dualism is comparative to the way we're understanding monism. So we could say, okay, you talked about matter and energy, right? And then you talked about morality and other properties that are emergent, right?
Yes.
How does something like morality emerge from matter?
Okay. First of all, matter is energy, right? E equals mc squared. Everybody knows that one, right? So matter is energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? Okay.
That is true.
We can, yes, and we can see the divisions between things because we all agree we live in a dualistic world. Morality seems to be, from Columbia University, is the evolutionary characteristic that helps us live in large groups. And from Buddhism, with minimal suffering, and with Confucianism, hopefully minimal conflict. If that's a reasonable description, then we can see the track of how morality evolved and how we're practicing it. Also, governance has to be added there because we're now in a system of governance. So morality emerges from, first, the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, of course. I mean, we all have to survive, right? You can't practice morality if you're dead. We have to keep families intact. So we have to, second level is very, very important too. And the third level is not unimportant, okay? I mean, I got to give it credit too. So morality says, first we take care of ourselves and we take care of our families. If our resources are limited, then we repel everybody else because we can't share.
Let me just cut you off real quick. My apologies. So you're describing what morality is and how it evolves and everything. What I'm asking though is how does morality emerge from matter at all? Like, at what point did morality appear into matter?
Morality could also be thought of as the best utilization of free energy. Yeah, morality is the best use of free energy in a material system. Yeah, and that would
Again,
be true of all for everything.
I agree. Describing what it is. Morality is obviously good for the material body to thrive and all of that, and different forms of matter to thrive. But what I'm asking is, how do you explain that conceptual gap? Like, you're saying that, so let's make some definitions here. Matter and energy is not conscious, at least according to, most physicalists, right? They'll say matter is just an activity. It's just energy. It's a process. It's a description. It's dead. It's inert. Like a rock is not, you wouldn't care about throwing a rock because it's not conscious, right?
Agreed.
So how does something like morality or consciousness or subjective experience, how does it arise in something like a rock? At what point? Why?
There's three basic laws that I have to explain first to answer your question. The laws of thermodynamics say there is energy, and everything basically is energy, and as time moves on, it gets diluted. Energy dilutes. And because of that, where the arrow of time is in one direction. The second law, chaos is everywhere, because everyone knows that the quantum physics means probability, and that can, and through the butterfly effect, can grow all the way to us. And then the third thing is system stability. And morality is the result of the most stable system maintaining itself and passing itself on to the next most stable system.
So you're saying subjective experience comes from a free energy?
Well, to a very it comes from energy and free energy. There's three regimes of energy you got to look at. First regime of energy is the energy you use. The second region of energy is the energy you can't get around losing, that which must be sacrificed to the second law. And then there's the free energy between your current efficiency and the maximum efficiency you could achieve.
But does energy start off? Does energy start off as an experience, or is energy something else?
Energy can start off as an experience. Yeah, because we have that.
It can.
So
okay, so there's the bridge. So you're saying consciousness comes from energy, and energy is conscious. It has a subjective experience involved in it already. Okay, so there is nothing to really bridge. So basically, you're just saying idealism. So your monism in this case is consciousness. You see what I'm saying? You're saying that your monism, you're making a case for monism, and you're saying that monism is consciousness because it's connecting everything. It's connecting the energy to the morality, like you had mentioned. So
yes,
that core is what people refer to when they're talking about monism. They're referring to that core connector, that commonality, that common denominator. Anyways, we haven't had Joel have a chance to ask Alex the questions I think he wanted to ask. Are you still there, Joel? I'm not trying to ignore you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a chance.
No, that's cool. I was just I was holding out. No, I just wanted to follow up on the comments that I made in the chat. Everybody kind of said, I don't see how, I don't get it. So just wanted to flesh that out a little bit. We were talking about the idea of a morality rooted in, I think, a idealist monist idea, right? That if we're all one thing, then there's our reason to treat each other well. Is that a fair summary of what had been said?
Not from my point of view, but from others' point of view.
Well,
Yeah,
it was
that's
Alex
what
and
he said basically.
From my point of view, I guess.
yeah, my point of view is contrary to that. But yes, continue. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Sophia.
No, I was gonna say that. Yeah, that was basically the point.
okay. Yeah, and I had said I've heard people use it as a way of excusing things that we would typically think of as bad, immoral, whatever. A few of you guys will know Paul from the group, but he is an idealist and a theist, and he was making an argument, kind of a defense of or against the problem of evil. But from a idealist monist position. So it goes a little like, there's a lot of suffering in the world, but it's something that the mind at large is doing to itself, basically. It's like going to the gym or putting yourself on a diet or whatever you want to call it. It's going through some pain and suffering to get to a better end. But instead of inflicting the pain and suffering on others, it's inflicted on yourself. And so you absolve yourself of of that kind of moral responsibility that you would typically say, oh gosh, I can't hurt someone else to do this, right? And so at the time, I pointed out to him, I think this opens up a very bad door where people, would say, okay, well, we can kind of treat each other badly then, because that's, that's just us treating us badly instead of, when you dissolve that distinction between one and the other, you're much more likely to say, hey, I can hurt myself in ways that are acceptable, that wouldn't be acceptable if you were really someone else. But since we're the same, I think it's passable. I think there's a flip side to that where, if I'm thinking about something that would be acceptable, for me to do to myself, that would cause me some suffering in order to get to some greater good. That if now we said, well, hey, we can think of others in that same way, where you can hurt them as long as it's to some greater good, right? And I think right now we kind of have that line drawn between ourselves and others. Yes, there are some things you can do to hurt yourself for the greater good that we're not going to call immoral. But if you're hurting other people, and you say, well, it's for the greater good, we're probably still going to think that's immoral. But when you dissolve that distinction, you kind of say, well, we can really, as long as it's for the greater good, we can hurt each other, because that's kind of the whole point of this reality that we're in. The greater mind, put us here for this reason, to have these experiences, to go through pain and suffering and grow and overcome and be heroes and find cures to diseases and all these things, right? And you say, well, we'd have to have the evil to do that. And so, it kind of dissolves even the reasons to think of things as evil, when you say, well, they're kind of necessary for the greater good. We gotta do them.
So there would effectively be no evil at all, really. That's just sort of a myth or an illusion under that, under idealism, is what you're saying.
Only on if you insist that that what we're talking about when we talk about good and evil and moral responsibility is somehow dissolved because idealism is true. If idealism is true, dissolves those responsibilities, then it does it across the board, not in just the areas that you want them to work. It has to be an all or nothing thing there.
May I suggest, I'd like to say, there's two different idealisms here. There's the monistic idealism and the dualistic idealism, and they're separate in this conversation. They should be separate.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. What would
Also, I am struggling I'm still struggling personally to understand the argument. Like, can you give me an example of where hurting somebody else might be for the greater good?
Yeah, so for instance, like, I don't know if you're a gym guy. Some people like go to the gym every single day, no pain, no gain kind of a thing. So for instance, what if you were forcing someone to do that who didn't want to do that? Would you agree that would be immoral?
Sorry, one of our audio was cut out there. Could you just repeat that for me?
Oh, well, I was just trying to give an example about, for instance, a lot of people might be very disciplined about going to the gym every day, no pain, no gain, but what if you found out that someone was forcing someone else to do that against their will? They hated going to the gym. They didn't want to be there, all that.
Well, I guess you're talking about violating somebody else's like basic free will. I mean, that imbued with us as individual minds is some degree of free will. I don't think that we should be transgressing on other people. So they are like, but I mean, you're talking about like forcing discipline on somebody or making good choices for their own benefit. I'm
saying it's important. It's important that they are someone else, right? If I say, well, we're really just two parts of the same thing, and I'm doing this for the greater good, right? Like you immediately went to, we don't want to transgress someone else's will, right? So that's what I'm saying is you've got to have that piece in there where they are their own thing. We are separate. And the idea that we are all part of one monistic reality bears no more moral weight here than it does at the point where you're trying to apply it, where you're saying, hey, if we live in a monistic world, we should really all treat each other morally, right, guys? Because we're all part of one big thing. But I'm saying if it applies there in that moral consideration, then it applies in the moral consideration where we're trying to impose our will on other people. We're all one thing, right? You're just a part of me, right? So if I say, well, you have to go to the gym every day, I don't care, if you say otherwise, I'm treating you like a part of me that I can just order around, right?
Yeah, somewhere I haven't come across very well if that's the impression I gave off. Like, I definitely believe that we are different people and that we need to treat each other as separate conscious entities, for sure. I mean, in a larger sense, for sure. So I don't think the fact that
I want to clarify something to you, Alex, because I think you missed that. What Joel is trying to say is that he has seen other idealists use idealism as an excuse to excuse the problem of evil. In other words, since we're all just an expression of the mind at large, then we're not accountable for anything bad. But that's not our position. He was just saying that when he said that earlier, we had that reaction of, well, we don't really see how that, how could you say that? And he's explaining to us what another idealist said. So that's not in line with how we see things. He's just telling us that someone on the flip side could use the argument to excuse evil.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I got you.
Sophia. That's a good clarification.
Joel,
thank you.
I would just say, Joel, that not all the idealists, we don't all necessarily agree, obviously, because I don't agree with that position at all. Or as an idealist, I don't agree with the logic that other idealist was arguing for in this case. So yeah, just to clarify, I wouldn't. Okay, I guess I can kind of, now that you've laid it out, I can see what they're. I'd be more responding to them than you directly, but to those people, I would just say like I just don't think that that actually follows from what our position is. I mean, we're experiencing dualism. We are individual conscious entities, limited, but we are individuals. So I don't think the fact that we're like monism, I don't think infers like a logic that I'm allowed to just force other people to do what I think is best for them. I mean, the fact that we're individual units of awareness and we have our own free will, I would posit that we need to respect that free will of each. Like that would kind of I mean, these are maybe a subjective thing I'm saying and not objective, but I'm saying like we'd have a larger conversation, but we have to, we're individual units of consciousness. We need to respect each other's free will within the system, I guess. So yeah, that'd be my position.
Let me just throw this out there for a little controversy. Because I was going to say, well, a parody could be a materialist who could say, you could say, well, materialists could also make that same argument that, either we respect each other's human rights, or we could use materialism to say, don't respect each other's human rights. But then an even further question could be, who has the more precedence for human rights, the idealist or the materialist? Because the materialist tends to look at the human being as a machine that emerged from unconscious matter. In fact, many feel that there is no such thing as consciousness at all. So anything like pain, like, I heard Destiny not long ago talk about he doesn't really believe in animal rights because he doesn't believe that animals are truly conscious. And he says his grounding of that is materialism. He's more of he's a hard materialist. So he says on materialism, there is no room for things like animal rights and worrying about whether things are sentient or not. So just asking all you guys, what would is that realistic? First of all, a good question. And if you do think that materialism is or idealism is better for morality or not, or either way, make a case for it. I guess that's my question.
I can make a case for idealism in a dualistic world. Okay, because ideally in a dualistic world, there is an absolute direction of good and bad, and we can actually see it very clearly. In a monistic world, I can see arguments going either direction, which is the fallacy of monism. So you pointed it out. You can a materialist can argue things in two directions. You actually pointed it out just now. I can't.
All right. Well, Joel would probably disagree with that. What do you think, Joel?
Well, I was just about to say I was going to hop off here in a second. Yeah, I'm not a monist about ontology. I don't take that position. I believe that we can have morals and ideas about what's right and wrong, independent of whatever that reality is. Hey, this is I don't know where you. And that's whatever ends up being the case about reality won't change what makes things right and wrong to us as subjects. That whatever is going on at that ontological level doesn't really have any bearing on morality.
So to be fair, it's mainly a question of whether morality is subjective or objective, basically, regardless of your ontology.
Yeah.
Well, some people fixate on that question for sure. To me, it's kind of obvious that it is subjective in its own ontology, meaning what makes morals real is minds. That's what I mean when it has a subjective ontology, is that it's real because subjects care about goals and we don't like being hurt. And so therefore we have preferences and so on, right? Now, a lot of those we could say, well, that's an objective fact about reality. Yeah, you can look at it that way too. And I think that's why you get a lot of disagreement about the question of whether morality is objective or subjective. But to me, it's clearly subjective in the sense that if there were no minds thinking and feeling and having preferences, then there would be no morality either. There would be nothing to call right or wrong in that situation.
What if the ontology was mental?
That's what I'm saying about morality, is that its ontology is mental. Are you saying what if the ontology of reality is mental, in the sense of idealism?
Like suppose theism was correct. Like suppose we live in God's world and God is the fundamental ontology and he's the one that decides what is moral, immoral. Would that make morality objective or subjective?
I think it would still be subjective, because it would still be about what thinking creatures feel and want, and our desires and preferences and all those things. In that reality, if all of a sudden God and all the other thinking creatures cease to exist, then there's nothing left to call moral or immoral, or morality wouldn't exist in our absence.
So objective. So anything we consider an objective fact must be grounded in something non-mental.
Well, right. If we can say that it's non-mental, then it's kind of got that objective ontology, just, that thought experiment being, could it exist if minds cease to exist, is kind of a simple way of testing that.
Gotcha. What do you think, Alex? I think Alex froze up. He looks like Jesus in that picture.
You hear me?
Oh, there he is. What do you think, Alex, about that?
I wanted to.
Uh-oh, there's a little lag or something.
Just going back even to what you were saying about destiny and the oh shit, can you hear me all right? Not coming through all right?
Yeah,
can you hear me okay?
Lag going on.
Okay. Shit. Okay, I can't tell. Should I bother responding, or should I just log off and try and charge this device again?
See if you can turn your camera off.
Yeah, the camera. Oh. Yeah, turn the camera off.
Okay.
That can help.
Yeah, let me try. Hold on. Okay. How's the audio now? Can you hear me any better?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to back up for a second, like as you were saying about my whole point is with destiny and the animals and everything, like monism or dualism, it doesn't matter. The point, the takeaway though, is that I don't think that consciousness is epiphenomenal. So I think that animals have subjective awareness. They can feel pain, and like it is a big part of behavioralism and Western science to feel like animals don't have awareness, so that therefore they can torture them. And I just read a book on like the history of a lot of this stuff. The stuff that we've done on animals in the name of science is abhorrent to me, because I actually do think that, like, especially mammals, but even other life, like they do have awareness. I don't think that consciousness is just an epiphenomenal byproduct. So that's important. And I don't, as I said, like, I don't think that anything is truly separate from awareness. So in my view, I was trying to clarify, there's some subjective elements to morality and some objective, in the sense that, like, mind at large is a metaconscious. If it's aware of us, then it's if we cause harm to other people, I think that does matter, because it's impacted by the larger mind, which, is going to make a decision there. I don't deny karma might exist in certain ways, right? So like, I don't know what happens when we die, but I definitely, I try to live my life in a moral way, because wherever I end up next, if there is any continuity at all, is probably dictated by my actions, because we're probably all connected in that sense. So that, like, the practical, pragmatic implication of all this, it matters for how we treat each other, because if there's any continuity of ourselves in any way beyond one life, well, in that sense, it definitely matters. I mean, yeah, jury's still out on that, I guess, but I intuitively tend to think that, like, my actions will have some sort of karma to them, and if not, I think they still contribute to the mind.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
I wonder in other words, like, when you get back to that kind of pool of consciousness that you've sprung from, you'll remember all the good things you've done and bad things you've done, right? But that means you're also going to, at that point, you're going to be every other bad person who's ever existed. Hitler got brought up earlier. You're going to be Hitler when you get there, right?
Well, I'm not sure. Like, there's two different models of that. Maybe, like, I don't know if we like maintain like a continuity of just our own lifetimes, or if it would be like one. Like, I guess from God's perspective, if you use that word, like, yeah, it sees everything, like all the serial killers, all the sadists, all the bad people. Like, it experienced and saw all those points of view. So scary.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, now you have no reason to be good. I guess I'm just kind of saying, maybe it's a small victory every time, someone comes back to the source, having done a little more good than evil in the world, But in any case, it is kind of a strange prospect to consider. Does it necessarily follow that if that's the situation, being what we call being good morally to each other now is the right thing to do in the cosmic sense?
It appears to me so, yes. I think I also, Bernardo Kastrup has this idea that like reality is like a sequence of dreams. Maybe when we die, we go into the next dream. We don't remember anything. Like when I wake up from my sleep, I don't remember any of the dreams I had last night after about 10 seconds, right? They fade. So like maybe, but like the type of dream that we go to next might be dictated on like what, how evolved we are as a consciousness in this dream, that sort of thing. Like there's different models that might be applied here, but I think that I was speculating earlier in the chat that God is trying to refine pieces of itself to create realities that are more pleasant for itself, put it that way. Out of infinity, there can be bad and good, and then, sorry. Continue.
You had said it was apparent. It was apparent to you, how you think we ought to act, but I'm kind of wondering where that is apparent. Is it something objective in reality that we can all look at, or is it something that you just kind of feel when you think about how you feel about how you treat people? Hey, I don't want to treat people badly, right? That's apparent to me when I treat people badly, is that I feel bad about it, right? But I'm saying those are subjective bases for us, and so. Sure. If we're considering the idealist reality, we haven't gotten to an objective source or an objective basis for treating each other in the ways that we consider good and moral. All we've done is said, hey, if we're all the same thing, then we should treat people good and morally. Well, I could say, if I'm just going to assert that we should treat people good and morally, I can leave the idealism out of that sentence altogether and just say we should treat people morally. You see what I'm saying? That's why I say these ideas that like, hey, really, if you accept this ontology, then the morality just kind of goes along with it. Seem to all kind of rely on that one little step. I would
argue that like, there was one extra point that I made along with my view, which is that it actually matters on if mind at large is meta-conscious or not, because you could be an idealist and a nihilist at the same time if you think that the mind, the pure substance that we come from, like the consciousness, like like an Einstein person might say there's an ocean of consciousness and we're a little drop of it in a bucket or something. Okay, well that might be so, but if that ocean isn't aware of us, then I still think it's a type of nihilism. Because it doesn't matter, like reincarnate, where I go next, or karma, or anything like that isn't real. But if that mind at large is meta-conscious, aware of us, then I think it matters.
Can you flesh out why it matters if it's meta-conscious? Why does it? Why should we act in a moral way if it is?
If it is, then I suspect that what it's doing has a type of purpose to it. It also would have consequences for us. If it's unaware of us, then we're all just naturalistic byproducts of it, and it's random, and it doesn't really imply any sort of feedback. Whereas if it's metaconscious of us, I think it's, you know, aware of us, observing us, then it's going to dictate where we go next, or what kind of things. Like, I think things also come into the
maybe
universe. Like,
maybe, but where does the assumption that it wants us to behave in this way or that way, like we care about behaving in this way or that way? What is the evidence
Can I
that
say something
the
about
meta
that?
consciousness would care about those things in the same way?
Go ahead, Sophia. Let Sophia jump in. She wanted to ask something too, and then we'll get
So
back.
the way I look at it is, I think the first mistake is that we think of consciousness or God as something like a perfect being. And I would say it's rather a perfect imperfection. In other words, it is what it is. And if consciousness is trying to learn through self-reflection by experiencing itself through interacting with all that is, then consciousness is always learning. And so I think it's pretty intuitive to think that it's pushing towards continuity, just like you're trying to live as long as you possibly can, right? You're not trying to do things that would destroy you, even though some people do get on that type of trajectory of self-destruction. But usually that's connected to a level of awareness, right? And we talked about that earlier. I guess it depends on what consciousness is fully aware of and what it isn't fully aware of. But this whole experience serves that purpose of becoming aware, making the unconscious conscious, so that you know, it's striving for wholeness. You know what I'm saying? It's not perfect though. It's trying to get there. And I think, you know what I'm saying? Like we intuitively aren't trying to do things to hurt ourselves. We all want longevity.
Yeah, we are not. Yeah.
And I think,
But the question though is whether the idea, if idealism is true, and the base thing, the one single thing that is real and makes up all of reality, is this kind of metaconscious thing, then I'm asking, why should we assume that it wants us to behave in the ways that we call moral, instead of assuming that it is indifferent to those things?
So,
for instance,
I have an answer
because
about that.
It may have a drive for continuity, and if we're all part of the whole, then continuity is kind of a collective thing. You see what I'm saying? So it wouldn't do itself a favor if it didn't care what each individual does.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't care. I'm saying it doesn't care about the things that we call morality. It might care about a lot of things, like experiences, like, you know, hey, I'm in it for the roller coasters, right? I'm just saying to assume and assert, really, that you know, reality at its fundamental level is a mind-like thing that just cares about has the same kind of values that we do, when we don't all even share the same values, is kind of a weird assertion to make. And it definitely doesn't seem like any kind of objective basis for an ethics system, because all you do is just kind of say, you know, to me, it's on par with the theistic ethics that just says, well, we ought to act ethically because God wants us to, right? And it's just kind of like, okay, well, you can assert that all day long. You can claim that's an objective basis. It doesn't make it so. And a lot of people are just going to say, I don't believe you. And if they don't, then there goes your ethics system. Now, how are you going to convince them to behave themselves?
It's also good to recognize all of the assumptions we can make going into some of these questions. Like one of the things that I had thought about was that very thing you're talking about, Joel. Like, why would it care? Blah, blah, blah. Well, assumed in that is that it's sort of disconnected totally from, you know, and it's sort of looking at everything from, you know, a certain perspective, that there's not just this intimate, deep feeling that we all have. Like, that's an assumption we make, which may not actually be the case. So I was thinking this way. I was thinking, you know, I'm not really a big believer in, or I just don't know if it's true that we have like this afterlife thing, right? So, but the one thing I do believe, because I have interviewed like dozens and dozens of near-death experiencers when I used to be out in California, part of the IONS, Association of Near-Death Studies in California, and I used to really interview a lot of people and kind of try to understand a lot of things about near-death experiences. And so there's core commonalities of all these experiences. Now, this, for me, this didn't reflect on any sort of afterlife. This just told me what people experience near death, not necessarily what happens when you die. But the one thing that I came away from is that one of the things they do is they have a life review, and the other part is that time stops. And unless they're revived, it seems like time is just there. You're just eternally there. So you're eternally there, reflecting on your life decisions and choices and regrets. And it can either be a hell or a heaven for you in that moment. This could just be the biological system, what brains do near death, right? Regardless, if time stops, your perception of all of these sort of experiences that you've lived and regrets and all of these things can be eternal for you. Maybe not literally eternal, but your perception, because your circadian rhythm has quieted down, your brain is no longer tracking time the way it usually does. For all intents and purposes, you are eternally living in regret, right? And it's just a thought that I had.
I can relate, because who hasn't like laid in bed at night trying to fall asleep, but instead you're thinking about something that you wish you hadn't done or said. Right. I mean, maybe not all of us. I know that's something that happens a lot in my mind, and it does kind of spur me on to try to do better, to try to, not say those things, to do better about how I treat people. Right. So, I mean, I get the idea. But again, those are reasons that we have in and of ourselves. Right. Like if I don't want to feel that way, and so I'm saying I'm not going to act that way because I don't want to feel that way. That's all my subjective preference within myself, right? I don't need any ontological view on that of what's behind, my experience or behind reality itself. For those reasons to work for me,
Guys,
well,
I'd like to jump in for just a second.
Let me ask you something, Joe.
I just want to say goodbye.
Joe.
I need to jump off.
Okay, we'll see you later, man.
Have a great one.
Bye,
bye, Dave.
All right.
Thanks again. I'm gonna jump off too soon,
Joe,
but yeah, Sophia, I got time for your question.
Let me ask you this. So you are the kind of person, right, that thinks about it, what you may have done wrong, and you self-reflect, right? And as an idealist, mystic, or whatever, I would say that's what consciousness does. But there are also people who may have a problem facing certain things and choose to dissociate from it, right? Would you say that some people do that? Okay, so I would say that is also an expression of consciousness, that consciousness very well can get caught up in a loop due to dissociation and ignorance. So I view consciousness as something that's imperfect. So I'm not one of the people that says, oh, well, you got to do what consciousness ought to want you to do. It's more like consciousness is what it is with its imperfect perfections, and it's just striving to evolve.
Yeah. And I mean, absolutely, that lack of perfection is something we can also all relate to, I think. But
Exactly.
again, I'm more trying to push back on the idea that, hey, if you start with these ontological positions, then you can get to these moral positions. And I guess I'm just kind of saying, it doesn't seem like you can do that, or that you need to do it. And I think there might even be an argument that you shouldn't do it. because if you convince someone that their ethics ought to be based on an ontological commitment, then if that ontological commitment shifts, then they may lose that grounding. You know, like somebody who believed in external minds and all of a sudden, now they're a solipsist, they might go, well, the good thing about being alone in the universe is I can treat all these other things however I want to, right? So you don't want an ethics that's tied to ontology. You want an ethics that's independent of as many things as you can. If you just can start with the assertion of like, I want to be treated a certain way. I have these preferences. I don't want to suffer. Well-being is important to me, right? And then kind of say, I also notice that you also feel that way about the people around you. And then, you go from there. You don't need any other philosophical commitments for it to hinge on, and possibly, if you put something as the basis of something, then you've made a trap door when it gets pulled out from under it.
But Joel, if you're an atheist, that means you get to murder as many people as you want.
No, I would basically agree with what Joel is saying. I don't think it's necessary to have a specific ontology. I think all we really need is commonality. We need to recognize that there's a commonality. We're all in this together. And at the end of the day, it requires empathy. This is how we achieve that commonality, is through empathy. And so if you can achieve that through whatever means
there you go.
you want to, I don't care about that. So that's just me. I don't care how you get there. You know what I mean?
Joel, to answer your question, I would say, like,
when you make statements.
Go ahead, Alex.
There's no, I guess what you're getting at is like a shared morality based on subjective preferences, and there's no problem with that at all, and it's a good thing. It's just that there's, if somebody doesn't share those subjective preferences, they just don't share it, and a lot of people don't experience empathy or things like that, like however their brain works or their psychology. So, there's just problems with that, in the sense that like some people are just going to not share. But when you're asking me, I guess I can concede that there's a bit of speculation on my part, because when I'm talking about morality and there being a meta consciousness, I just perhaps I am speculating, or it's just a subjective opinion. But I do think that it implies that there's some purpose going on in what happens. Otherwise, the mind at large probably wouldn't really care about us. But also, just because if the mind at large is metaconscious, it feels pleasure and pain. So it would naturally care when we're inflicting pain on other people, because we're inflicting pain on it. So just from my logic there was that from its point of view, it wants to minimize the bad stuff and maximize the good stuff. And the other issue is, like, I granted, like, I'm speculating partly, I'm not making like a mathematical truth argument here, but it based on, Scott was saying, near-death experiences and this other mountain of evidence, it seems like there's very possibly like more going on than just this limited lifetime. And so we should be considering that, because, our actions might literally have consequences for like what comes next in that sense. So that's kind of what I was thinking there.
Could be. I mean, it's easy to imagine that whatever it is that's calling the shots after death.
Joel, you cut out.
Looks like he's drowning.
Oh no. Yeah, my thought on that is that even if there's not an afterlife, it matters, and it even matters beyond this lifetime, if that makes sense. Like, let's say near death, in the last second that you're biologically alive, you're going through this hyper reality experience of, the tunnel, the light, the life review. The thing is, it's timeless. So even if in one perspective, you only live maybe 30 seconds from your cardiac arrest till the time your body just gives out, experientially though, you could be living forever because your brain has just
But
stopped
I
functioning the
think
same
Joel's
way. That's
point,
bad enough.
I think Joel's only point is that he feels like you don't need to have an idealism ontology to be a good
Yeah.
person. I think that's what he's saying. That's his only point. He's saying that someone could take the concept of idealism and completely flip it on its head and use it to be to excuse or justify bad things. And I mean, I agree. At the end of the day, we have to have some kind of commonality that shouldn't be based on your ontology. I just think that non-dualistic type of belief systems have always been more unifying rather than divisive. So from that standpoint, I would say non-dualistic belief systems are probably better. That's just my opinion. Because I mean, when we're looking at religious systems like Christianity and whatnot, we see a bunch of divisiveness, right? And there are so many different denominations in Christianity. It's like, which one do you pick? And none of them get along. So I'm just the kind of person, I try to look for the commonality that unites
Right.
us, and non-dualistic belief systems seem to do that. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to be an idealist, because non-dualism exists in many forms. And at the end of the day, they all have so many commonalities that they can also all come together, in my experience. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Well,
that's
there's a
kind of
lot
like
of
what I say
sects of
difference
Buddhism
between
and Hinduism
non-dualism and
too.
idealism.
So
Mhm. Go ahead.
You said what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Who said that? Or what was that?
I was just saying Buddhism and Hinduism that a lot of times people will say are rooted in that kind of non-dualistic basis. There's quite a bit of division and sectarianism within those organizations as well. But hey, guys, it's been real. My battery's about to die, and I'm getting looks from my wife letting me know
All right.
it's time to say goodbye.
Bye-bye, Joel.
All right, Joel.
I appreciated the conversation.
Yeah, man.
Y'all
Thank
take it
you.
easy.
Yep. You guys have a good one, Joel. Ooh.
Well, I mean, to answer to what he just said last, like I wasn't making the claim that all non-dualistic viewpoints are perfect. You know what I mean? And like we said earlier, there are some problems with Buddhism. Some of it can even downright seem like nihilism a bit, but that's a whole nother argument. That's not even what we're saying. I don't know.
And Hinduism has the caste system where they view like homeless people on
Right.
the street as they were that's just their karma from their past life. So don't feel sorry for them. They did some bad shit in their previous life, so they deserve it.
Yeah, those Eastern religions that are based around like a form of idealism, that's a good example of where I think you can be an idealist and sort of a nihilist, because like I said, like I perceive Buddhism to be a soft form of nihilism as opposed to like Nietzschean hard nihilism or something. So there's a lot of problems with like idealism if you're not acknowledging that there's a larger meta consciousness. Otherwise, like that runs into the same problem with Joel's morality just being subjective preferences. As long as everyone's going to acknowledge that these are just subjective preferences, I don't disagree with anybody. But the problem is we all seem to be good-hearted, like empathetic people, so to us it all makes sense. But a lot of other people who don't possess the same psychology, they're just not going to adhere to those subjective preferences.
Yeah, normativity.
Right.
Like there's normativity in morality. Like most laws reflect most people's values. Like most societies, murder is outlawed, rape is wrong, slavery is wrong. All of these sort of things are normative. So those must be
Yeah, but what we
grounded
got
in
going on
something.
right now also, what we got going on right now also is this thing called desensitizing people to things. things that we naturally don't agree. We get so bombarded with it until people become desensitized to it. And I think that also can play a big role in how values of societies change over time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think Western civilization has never had, you use slavery there as an example. I don't think Western civilization has really had 99% of the time has a problem with slavery. And even today, we don't have the, classical slavery we used to have, but we're getting into wage slavery, and it just becomes naturally ways of just turning people into forced laborers. So like, that's a great example where like it ties into capitalism and the culture wars. Like, I don't think Western society really has a problem with slavery. We just pretend like we do.
That's right.
Yeah,
It's virtue
it's like
signaling.
you have none but, and then you have nothing but willing slaves too. Like that's
Yeah,
fucked up.
that's exactly. You did brainwashing.
Yeah,
Yes, and I
there's
think
even a
I
movement.
think that alone proves though that consciousness is a primary thing, because if you think about it, they're constantly targeting people's consciousness, constantly bombarding it. If consciousness was so irrelevant, then why do they target your consciousness so much?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like when
But
I was a
I
salesperson,
mean,
I'll always tell that story. Like being a salesperson, the number one thing they learn is, it's about emotionalism, getting into your emotional centers and hacking your mind, getting you to get on the yes
Yep.
train, getting you invested in saying yes and this and that. And it's easier then to close the sale by the end of the presentation. And so, yeah, it's all about jumping into and attacking the mind. That's the director, that's the director of the orchestra.
Yeah.
so I mean, they must be aware. They must be aware of something, right? Because it seems like they know damn well what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're pretty good at it at this point. Scott, you
Yeah,
brought
I
up
would say.
like near death experiences, for example, and like I've looked into that. It's just a hobby of mine, like that, and also like DMT trips. You know how people often report this expression? They use the expression "it felt realer than real." Right? Sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
they're on a psychedelic drug, or sometimes when they're having a near death experience, they subjectively they're trying to describe it, and it's a state of consciousness. That's a phrase I encounter all the time. They say it felt realer than real, like I was more awake than when I'm awake in this, like, when you're in a dream and it's fuzzy and you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm awake. Now I'm awake. Like, obviously that was a dream, but they kind of describe like a state above what we're in right now, where they're even more hyper aware of things. And that's why I speculate, or I tend to think that there's like levels of awareness. And I'm like, there's even more above what we're right. The three of us right now are in a waking consciousness state and we're having this discussion and we all have our own consciousness, but like, there could be a level above this. And I think that, like I was talking about the concept of like evolution and the universe being infinite, maybe refining itself. So like maybe the goal of this is to keep growing as we have free will, so we could go the other direction too, right? So again, like I think morality could be objective in the sense that if this whole system is set up to facilitate a kind of like evolution of the pieces, then again, like our actual behavior really matters. And I just the way I subjectively judge good and bad is like how much pain or negativity are you inflicting on others versus not doing that. Because if God were, like, hypothetically, I'm speculating here, but like, because a lot of religions don't do this, they don't ask why. If there's a God mind or a universal idealistic mind, and it wants to experience dualism, but also have free will, it probably wants to be in a world where the other pieces of itself aren't likely to hurt it. And the only way you could do that is to evolve a bunch of smaller pieces of itself up to the level where they're naturally like empathetic, loving. Like, this isn't not a scientific term, but for lack of a precise term, loving beings. Like, so I do, like, this isn't, I wouldn't argue this in a university thesis paper or anything, but in a personal level, I kind of think the point of existence for me anyway is to evolve into a loving person. And hopefully in the next lifetime, like, I am surrounded by other people who also chose to become that. I'm not religious, but I think a lot of these traditions might have like tapped into types of things that they've tried to express through symbols or parables or allegories or whatever. Like hell is probably a state of being for people that are, not very loving people surrounded by other not very loving people.
That's exactly right,
Yeah.
Alex. It's like
And I
every
think
day.
that,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead. Well, number one, if you ever want to have that experience, I am the plug. And
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a great experience, and it is a little different from just being, in this state. So I would definitely recommend that you try it. And I lost my train of thought. Never mind. I was gonna say something else.
Sorry,
Well,
what did you mean? Try what?
DMT.
You
Oh,
were talking about DMT.
yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I would like to try that eventually.
Man,
You should.
I want to go back to Texas. Me and Sophia, and yeah, we had a great time when I was there a few years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, we
We
went on a
hit that shit
safari.
every day.
So have you
A
both had that
safari.
feeling? Have you
Huh?
both had that experience
People-
of enlarged consciousness, or like a more awake than awake in this form?
So I
Absolutely.
could give you a brief breakdown of what happened to me, because I kind of stumbled into it, and I was
Okay.
vehemently against it because I had all the wrong ideas about it. And so I was just like, hell no, I would never do that. I don't know why I thought that it can kill you, but I was just like, no, no, no. But so one day I was introduced to it at a park. And at first I was like, no, I'm not doing that. But peer pressure kind of got to me, and I hit it and I didn't feel anything. And I hit it again and I didn't feel anything. And I was like, this shit is whack. I don't feel anything. And then the third time did the trick. And I'm not gonna lie, it was brutal. There's no other way to put it, because you
Yikes.
literally feel like you feel like you're dying, like you feel like you're being annihilated, and you're non-existent. And so all I remember is I was holding my face and I was looking at the people who handed it to me, and I told them, oh my fucking God, y'all just fucking killed me. And so
That sounds very
that
scary.
happened. Yeah, it was brutal as fuck. And then all of a sudden, though, once I got through that part of it, it was like, wow, all of a sudden everything just made complete sense. I no longer felt like an individual that's separate from things. I felt like it was just all one, and everything became alive. Nothing looked like dead matter. It all looked like it was alive and vibrant. And, it was just, I had this realization that, that I didn't even know who Sophia is anymore. Like, I didn't identify with this identity anymore. It was completely a foreign concept to me. So that's how it feels. I experimented a lot more with it, and I could go into a lot more stories, but you just need to try it. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, it is on my agenda, but I'm also curious. Like, I'm confused by what you're saying. Like, do you still can you feel fear or anxiety or joy like in that state, or like you say you feel like you're connected with everything else, but if something else is in pain, do you feel the pain of that thing, or what do you mean?
So what happened to me is I actually have a lot of sinus problems. So I have a lot of sinus pressure headaches. And when I first did it, in the first few seconds, it seemed like it amplified the pain that I had. And it was
Yeah.
excruciating, but that only lasted for like a second. But then it was like, the best way I can describe it is I was no longer in my body. So once I was completely, the brutal part about it is you're not subtly leaving your body. You're just being ejected, like fucking, you just shoot out of your body. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then once you settle into that feeling of being out of body, it's like there's only warmth. There's no pain. There's like, you don't feel heavy anymore. It's just like lightness. You know what I mean?
Huh. I'm
It's
fascinated by
kind of
this.
like that. Yeah, it's
And
just
you know, we
lightness.
can,
And
and you know, we
go
can
ahead,
like,
Scott.
I was just thinking, you know, I've off after my experiences, like especially my first few experiences, I was just left for months just trying to make sense of the experience. Like I've had a lot of experiences on different drugs and I've had hallucinations and I know the difference. So putting those like together, like I had mushroom experiences, you know, coke, you know, all those kind of drugs and shit. And I thought that's what it was going to be. But then when I did it, it was totally different, more it was more profound. And it left me just questioning like, how do I make sense of the experience for months? And I've just come to kind of like try to look at it like I think what happens is that your brain, you know, is kind of like a filter of reality. You know, you can only see so much of the light spectrum. You can only perceive so much of the world. Otherwise, you'd be overloaded. So the brain's job is to kind of deceive itself and limit itself, you know. And what happens is when parts of your brain quiet down, then you become open to different things. Like people that have like synesthetics, you know, synesthesia is one of these conditions where you damage a certain part of your brain and all of a sudden they have access to all this information, like colors they've never seen,
Yeah.
experiencing things in different ways, having musical abilities, able to remember stuff in fine detail from years and years and years ago. Just, you know, the brain is, once you tweak it a certain way, it becomes open, you know. And I think what DMT does is just temporarily, it does kind of that work for you. It kind of quiets certain things down in your brain that allows you to experience reality in a much more broad way, you know. And so you have
But
access to things that you wouldn't normally.
I also want to
Uh,
add though, you know, like a lot of people have this misconception. They promote stuff like, oh yeah, you do DMT, it just kind of realigns you and fixes you overnight. And I want to say, don't believe that. And you do have to be ready to experiment with it, because from my experience, what happens is it just kind of, like he said, opens you up to a completely different perspective. It kind of removes any type of preconceived notions and you're completely open. So what happens after that? And that can take place over the course of months or even years. It just depends on you. But, you know, you're asking for truth. You're asking for the unfiltered raw truth when you're doing DMT. And so that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean you're just going to be healed overnight and you're just going to have it all together. No, what follows after that is you actually have to do the work. And so things that worked for you previously may not work for you at all. And you're going to wonder what the fuck is going on. It looks like every door is closing. Old things are not working the way they used to. And it feels like what I refer to a tower moment in your life, because it seems like the entire structure that you identified with, it just gets ripped away. It just gets pulled completely down. And you have to kind of find your footing again. And you're basically rebuilding a completely new structure. So it can feel very disorienting. You're, I'm sorry. I hear. I didn't hear that because it sounded like a lot of static.
You still there?
Yeah. I don't. Now I hear you.
So I wasn't saying anything before. You were talking, then the audio cut out. I'm not sure if that's on my end or yours.
Oh, I don't. I don't know. It sounded like some kind of loud echo. But yeah, I was just saying, like, you know, people do got to count the cards when they're dealing with stuff like that. I'm not gonna promote this as some kind of miracle thing, and it's all just rosy, because it can be pretty brutal. I mean, it just depends on each individual's mind state and perspective at the time that they're using these things, and what your state of mind is in general. It can look different for every person, but I would never sit there and say it's just a rosy experience, okay? Because it's not. It can be
And I think
pretty brutal.
people can misuse it too. Like some people just do it as an escape. Like they want to escape their reality. Like they work 9 to 5 really hard, you know, every day. They're like, oh, I can't wait to go on this retreat. I'm going to do DMT. The next time, oh, I'm going to try ayahuasca and I'm going to have like this, I'm going to do this heroic dose of MTEO DMT or whatever. And it's like they're constantly trying to escape and experiment and try new things. And that misses the whole point, I think. Like for me, I think
they're not actually doing the work.
Yeah, it's like the trick is to integrate. You want to use that experience to integrate in order to make your everyday experience more balanced, where you can kind of take away the lessons from it. And you don't want to have to do DMT ever again after that. Like you want to make it to where it can be a thing where, oh, it opened me up. It kind of enlightened me on certain things. Now I function more balanced in life. I have more empathy in life. I have more love in life. So you don't want to look at it like
when I hear these stories, the first thing that comes to my mind is like how different it would be for a clinical psychopath or a narcissist to do DMT, because their whole mind structure is different than ours. So like, you know, I'm not a narcissist. Like,
it has no effect on narcissists. And nope, has none. So I know that from experience. It doesn't affect them. It's almost like their body rejects it because their ego is just too big. So it
that makes sense to me. Like,
at all. Yeah, it doesn't work. And I thought that was pretty fascinating.
When I first did DMT for the first time, it was me and my brother out in California when we lived out there, and he knew this designer dealer in LA, and he brought us DMT from South America, and he was also a shaman or whatever, and we did it, man. And my brother used to be a chain smoker. He'd smoke like 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Like he was really addicted for years, like all his life pretty much. And then after the first time of doing DMT, he had no desire for cigarettes at all anymore.
Now I can believe that, because when I did it, I didn't have a desire to drink caffeine. But it didn't last, unfortunately. But then I also found out that stimulants interfere with psychedelics, and maybe that's why I suddenly no longer felt the urge to drink coffee. But as I stopped experimenting with it, because I only do it like maybe once a year or so these days, I have it on handy, but I don't do it. Like I only do it, as I call it, I only do it when it calls me, when I need to rearrange my room or something, right? But other than that, it didn't last, unfortunately. And I think it's just, I think it's because, you know, we get caught up in this life. We get caught up in the stress of it. I mean, it is, after all, a practical experience as well. And sometimes there are other things happening around us that we just can't control. And so we do get caught up in this daily, you know, rat race. And sometimes, you know, we just have to take a break, you know, and realign ourselves. But it's not some kind of miracle drug that just fixes you overnight. I don't believe those stories. Even if it has an initial effect on you, like not craving cigarettes or not craving some kind of whatever substances. I heard it's helped alcoholics. But at the end of the day, you got to maintain that. You got to continue to do the work. You know, it doesn't just it doesn't just magically fix you. It gives you a new perspective, and then you have to maintain that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I'm going to get off here. I'm going to end the stream. We've been at it for over 3 hours. So
hey, that's
I need to get
goes.
something to eat. Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming through, man. I'm glad to have met you and had this conversation. It's been really, really fun. Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a huge pleasure, and I really apologize for my technical difficulty here because it's a super enjoyable conversation. So we can definitely have more conversations as frequently as you're interested, and I'll promote your channel on my channel as well. Hopefully, we can help each other out. And thanks for
Hell
inviting
yeah.
me on. Much pleasure.
I'll stay in touch. We'll
Thank
come up
you
with
for
something
coming.
and bring you on, man.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in touch.
All right, you too.
You too. Peace
All right,
out.
guys, we are out. Later.